Chapter 1151. Tens of thousands of burning iron lights rose into the sky and blended into the vast sea of stars. As the countless stars rotated, the radiant lights were as taut as bowstrings. Thus, the cold, killing intent spilled down on the mortal world below, spreading far and wide. The moment he was locked on by the countless lights, even Woodman was stunned for a moment and fell into a daze. His empty mind only had time to think of a curse word. F***ck. What on earth happened? What kind of scene was this? Although the momentum of that attack just now was terrifying, to him, it was nothing more than a petty trick that was not worthy of being elegant. However, now that the entire secret apparatus was operating under his will, it had expanded to a scale that made his hair stand on end. It was so huge that even he could feel a trace of trembling. What the hell? Was there a F***king problem somewhere? Wasn't he still a great Ming the last time he saw him? Or could it be that he had actually not died for 2 months, but for 20 or 30 years? In the blink of an eye, he had become a duck? But even if someone were to tell him that someone could kill him, then use the prelude to the War of the Worlds as a prelude to the War of the Worlds, then rely on firepower to directly destroy Nager's fleet, and also bring back a few thousand dead ascendants from hell, he would probably scoff. Are you kidding me? Is this reasonable? But now, he finally remembered that there were some people in this world who existed, and that was the proof of a logic. For example, the Astronomy Society, the Republic, and Huaishur. At this moment, not only were the countless ascendants in hell shocked, even Huaishur was a little stunned by the terrifying efficiency of the secret apparatus. With just the appearance of his will, the stars automatically rotated, carrying out his orders, transforming his thoughts, and extracting endless power to create this jaw-dropping spectacle. It was too easy. The whole process didn't even delay any expansion and development. It was as easy and simple as going to the convenience store downstairs to help Huaishur bring back a bottle of Coke. The 24 solar terms, the Pantheon Temple, and even the solar ephemeris, all of the origin substances emitted by the secret instruments and miraculous engravings, as well as all of the visible but insignificant energy within the reality realm, were carefully picked out like grains of sand and gathered in his hand one by one, forming a towering mountain. Many as one. This was Great Ming. Through constant adjustments to ensure the operation of the cycle, all of the power was linked together with the same axis, the same will, and gathered in one's hands, using one's own will to change everything before one's eyes. This was Yun Zhongjuan. In that moment of absent-mindedness, Huaishur almost suspected that he was leaning against a super-large, luxurious version of the Ultimate and the Celestial Palace. But the moment he reacted, he suddenly realized that it was too late. Weren't the Ultimate and the Celestial Palace miracles created by imitating the great secret instrument? What he had been learning, trying, and understanding all this time seemed to be the prerequisite for mastering this great secret instrument. Now, when he truly held the great secret instrument in his hands, he was shocked by the nature of his own power. He seemed to hear the happy laughter of a black-hearted woman in his ears. She was so proud. It was just a brief moment of absent-mindedness, less than a snap of a finger flashed by. Now, with Huaishur's will, the iron stars fell. The thunder in the night sky surged, and countless mournful white waves had already spread out. Those burning stars had a sharp edge, tearing through the darkness of the night, bursting forth with dazzling light. Wherever it passed, everything was cleanly sliced apart, leaving behind a perfectly straight mark. Pointing at the ground, tens of thousands of marks intersected at the same point. Where Woodman was. Now, the starry sky revolved and threw a flaming sword at the mortal world. Why sure, you motherf***cur Woodman didn't have time to curse anymore. He quickly raised his hand, and the flowing gray mist once again condensed into a massive pair of wings and propped them up. The iron light that had converged into a torrent stagnated for a moment. However, this stagnation couldn't last for long. Because the number of attacks was too great, and the power had risen to a new level. The scale and distance needed to exhaust the kinetic energy given to them were too great, and could no longer be contained in a single wing. Now, the gray mist that had condensed into a wing surged like a tide, transforming into a turbulent flow. As the hurricane spread, the torrent of iron light continuously sank into the gray mist, and the gray mist was like the entrance to another world. No matter how many attacks came, it remained motionless, probably? Only the sound of cloth tearing could be heard. The gray mist wings were constantly shrinking, revealing the heavily torn earth below and the lava spewing out of the earth's crust. Under the evaporation of the iron light, the haze quickly dissipated. Perhaps one or two was just a joke, but under the consumption of the torrent, even Woodman had no choice but to use all his strength to defend himself. Even so, it was still beyond his power. Behind the thin gray mist, the handsome face was already covered in cracks. "Stop!" He roared angrily, raised his right hand and held up the falling stars. Countless burning radiances were extinguished bit by bit, but there were even more sharp blades that pierced through the defenses and stabbed into the skinny body. In the end, the thunder gradually dissipated. On the devastated earth, Woodman expressionlessly stretched out his hand, pulled out the few blades that pierced his body, and crushed them. A smile appeared on his spasming face. He was so angry. "You're really something, kid." Sparse gray mist spread out from his wounds. In the lingering mist, it was as if a new pair of giant wings had spread out in the darkness. Covered the sky and covered the sun. What was even more shocking was the flowing blood on the ground. In the boiling blood, the outline of a giant snake slowly rose from it. A ferocious might that was not inferior to that of a ruler was revealed. The giant snake hissed, and slowly rose up with the dignified godlike solidifier, facing Huai Shi from afar. Beneath his feet, the giant scarlet snake that was mixed with gray and black also spread out 11 strange giant wings. It twisted rapidly in the darkness, head and tail connected, just like the light wheel behind the Buddha, but it was so ferocious. "TSK, I thought it was a little bastard raised by Russell, but I didn't expect. I take back my words. Huai Shi, you're stronger than your teacher at this age." Woodman spat out the blood in his lungs and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes surged with ferocity. "It's a pity that you're not strong enough." In that instant, the giant snake totem rotated, and a fierce light suddenly surged in the surging waves. It absorbed the power from hell without any hindrance, and in an instant, the projection of the entire abyss shook violently. Then, the giant snake opened its mouth and spewed out a dark torrent that penetrated the heavens and the earth. As if a red-hot iron rod had suddenly pierced into a bucket, there was a boiling explosion in the air. The light of destruction rumbled forward. At this moment, the analysis program of countless probes sounded the highest level of alarm. On the huge screen in the decision-making room, countless analyses and information from other organizations appeared on it, but in the end, everything related to the essence was almost hidden in a mystery. It was as if it was blocked by a certain program, making it difficult to display. Secret? Damn it, countless people stared with their eyes wide open, waiting for the results, but now they realized that what blocked the analysis was actually the orders and authority left behind by the Utopia. But soon, a further analysis from the bronze eye was sent over. The results this time were even more confusing. Preliminary analysis of the source of the stigmata, celestial genealogy. Celestial genealogy? Why the F***CK is it celestial genealogy again? For a moment, countless angry gazes looked at Russell. Russell was stunned for a moment, and as if he had come to his senses, he patted his head and revealed a weak, helpless, and confused look. "It seems like there is such a thing." The old tortoise smacked his lips and shrugged helplessly. "Look at me. How could I forget?" No one answered. Everyone knew that the 9 paths claimed by celestial genealogy were a mess. There were 3 different versions, and each of them seemed to make sense. Just after everyone accepted this setting for so many years, this group of people actually found half a path to paradise from under the box, so the 9 paths that they claimed were for the group, right? Weren't there hundreds of trainees who were studying how to sing and dance rap every day? No one knew how many tricks the Utopia had up their sleeves, but no matter what, they made sense. Eternity, Heaven's Inquisition, Spirit Marrow, Change, Dusk, Maintenance, Origin, Cycle. Just like what Russell had told Huaishur before. These were the 8 fixed paths of ascension that the Utopia had already determined before the fall of Heavenly State. As for the missing 9th path, it was declared a secret to the outside world. In fact, within the Utopia, the choice of the 9th path of ascension was quite different. Because its nature and origin were too sensitive, they were hesitant about whether to make it public. Or they could simply replace it. The path to paradise was prepared for this. Unfortunately, before the decision was made, the Utopia had already been destroyed by the impact of the Deep Siphon. Only a group of lonely souls and wild ghosts lingered on the ruins of the past. Looks like it's still not enough to grind the bones and scatter the ashes. Russell sighed softly and muttered to himself, I have to do it more thoroughly next time. When he looked at Woodman on the screen, the old man, who had always been elegant, no longer smiled. Instead, some kind of heart-palpitating coldness and cruelty appeared on his face. His killing intent was ferocious. He originally thought that when Woodman's main body was killed by him, everything related to him had been completely severed. He did not expect to be able to reappear here, the dark side of the Utopia, the dark history of the celestial genealogy. It was not that it was deliberately mysterious, but that it could not be made public. It was the idea of the celestial genealogy, an unfinished creation. Before the White Crown King fell asleep, he secretly cooperated with the Pioneer Association to target Hell, using the former Holy Spirit genealogy and the heritage of the gods to create a weapon against Hell. Its essence was taken from the Holy Spirit genealogy before it split, and its structure was completed by the White Crown King. Its essence was the combination of all the angels of death, such as Jaina, Abaddon, Mananhanvit, Metatro, and so on. The large group that was equipped with it was the Hell Heavenly Army, the Purification Army, made of countless death row prisoners and coagulators, transforming them like consumables. It made all sinners fight with other sinners in hell, and in order to do evil in the present world, all the mud that could not be supported by the wall was used as trash and turned into a force to guard the present world. Celestial Genealogy, Path of Original Sin. The peak of this path, the true body of the 5th rank, was the power that Woodman was displaying right now. Samael, the angel of death, Samael, now, in the black fog gathered by all the death, the giant serpent wheel that represented the essence of Samael's death slowly rose. The torrent that brewed endless anger and death burst out, piercing into the realm of the present world like a sharp blade. Countless ascendants instantly felt the trembling from the bottom of their hearts, the fear from the soul, and the fear of death itself. Except for Huaishur, from the beginning to the end, between heaven and earth, surrounded by the stars, Huaishur's expression was only indifferent. Death? Could it be that something that was as common as eating a meal was worth talking about? It was not worth mentioning at all. When the king of Donbor raised his hand again, the revolving stars suddenly calmed down. The great secret apparatus that had been expanded to the limit shone in the night sky. Under the dual operation of Great Si Ming and Yun Zhongjuan, everything returned to the framework and guidance of the Creator. The entire present world was connected into one in an instant. It was in Huaishur's hand. Endless weight was placed in his soul, and in just an instant, it seemed to completely evaporate his soul. But that was all it took to stop him. An unprecedented understanding emerged in his heart. When Huaishur's character was connected to the great secret apparatus as a component, his role was no longer to fight and kill, but to connect everything that the great secret apparatus passed through into one. Let the power of the present world face the enemies of hell in a way as a whole. In other words, in a certain sense, the present Su-Yangyi was a human-shaped rainbow bridge. Even if he could not deliver the power of all places across the sky and achieve the effect of the stairway to heaven, just as a glue and a buffer zone, it was enough to integrate all the power of the four sides under the system of the great secret apparatus. Now, with his will, radiance rose from all directions. Like a giant pillar, it held up the sky. Everything resonated. Fusang in the 24 solar terms, the Great Pyramid under the solar calendar, the church rampart built on the border, and even the pantheon that gathered endless miracles. Now, under the guidance of the outpost, they formed a whole. Everything rotated. This was the luxurious gold version of Supreme Symphony. The huge projection of Fusang flashed around Huai Shi's body. Countless lives appeared and disappeared, affecting the invisible 24 solar terms and the rotation of the 4 seasons. The invisible barrier blocked Samuel's attack and quickly consumed Woodman's power. The projection of the divine calendar appeared out of thin air with Liz's cold snort. The sharp sun from the center defeated the torrent of death and swallowed it. The radiance of the pantheon gathered all the dissipating disasters. In a short moment, he casually borrowed the power from all sides to eliminate Woodman's attack. He even converted the power and reloaded it into the interior of the ivory tower. But this time, Huai Shi ignored Woodman's gloomy expression. He threw those unimportant things to the back of his mind and did not even bother to look at them. He just smiled and spread his arms. He listened to the countless voices from the stars. Countless crisp voices echoed. Countless frames and laws extended from the sky and connected to the 4 pillars established by the major lineages. At that moment, the structure of the great mystic Zarathustra was completely completed. In the deep underground of the present realm, the vast light of the endless stars completely illuminated the darkness. The power from the fragment of Gaia poured endlessly into the crack, and the power from the present realm, through this resonance, turned into a rainbow-like bridge, crossing the endless depths and descending. The second project, Rainbow Bridge, was completed. Under the infusion of endless miracles and power, in the center of the great mystic ritual, the control center specially built for Huai Shi quickly unfolded. A solemn throne appeared behind Huai Shi. It connected him to it. It was like welcoming the soul of the great mystic ritual into the stars in the sky. In the roar from hell, countless laws pulled the throne and slowly rose toward the starry sky. Ascension begin. Chapter 1152. It was so fast that it was unimaginable. In less than half an hour, the great mystic Zarathustra had covered the entire realm with terrifying efficiency, leaving no time for the abyssal rulers to react. It was like a chain reaction. That kind of speed could no longer be described as a domino. It was more like a fuse. There was no detour, and no precious power was wasted. The moment it was ignited, everything was led to the end at lightning speed. For this day, the continuation court had been preparing for decades. Considering all the situations and accidents, they prepared for the worst and prepared for the best. They also made many plans and implemented them accordingly. More than 16 plans were in the hands of the creator, Nakajima. But this time, even Nakajima was shocked by this surprise. Not letting anyone down, Huai Shi had achieved the responsibility entrusted to him at a speed that exceeded everyone's expectations. Now, the foundation of the major lineages had been stabilized. Fusang, the Pantheon, the Sacred Coffin, the Solar Ephemeris, and even the 6 paths of reincarnation that filled the interior had turned themselves into pillars to support the world created by humans. The foundation was established. Now, relying on the resonance between the great mystic ritual of the same realm, a steady stream of power was being poured into the stars. The majestic power operated in the stars, leading the center to rise toward the vast sea of stars. It brought Huai Shi's soul into the vast world within the fragment. It was truly endowing it with a soul. At that time, the abyss would no longer have a foothold. When they woke up from the misdirection of the present realm and the various lineages, no matter which side of the ruler, they could no longer sit and watch the completion of the ascension. No longer caring about any consequences, they burst out with all their power, abandoned the opponents in front of them and the siege from all sides, and rushed straight to the throne that was rising under the starry sky. At this moment, in the desert that was full of rifts, a hurricane suddenly spread. A deep depression appeared on the ground again. In the deepest part of the depression, the skinny old man turned back and looked at the distant starry sky, frowning slightly. The moment his back foot lifted slightly, there was a whistling sound in the wind. In the distance, a rift opened up from the ground again, extending straight toward the heretic king. The heretic king turned around and stomped his foot on the ground once again. With a dull thud, the expansion of the rift valley came to an abrupt halt. "Where are you looking at, Senior? We haven't finished fighting yet." On the other side of the canyon, the blood-stained shadow emerged from the dust and grinned. "Or are you going to be merciful and spare my life? He's not dead yet?" So annoying. The heretic monarch looked at his opponent expressionlessly. Unlike his youthful appearance, his slightly aged face was already graying, and slight wrinkles could be seen at the corners of his eyes. However, the smile on his face became even more frivolous and licentious, and he was wearing the same colorful clothes that he used to wear when he was at the Yoshihara Tavern. There was even a lacquered black comb that came out of nowhere in between her long hair. However, such an elegant demeanor was destroyed by the wound in his chest. Blood continued to flow out of the wound, and the internal organs were completely messed up. Their positions were completely out of place. Inside, the only thing missing was the thing that kept beating. Heart. It was crushed. Half an hour ago. However, he still seemed to be alive and kicking, as if nothing had happened. It was as if he had only lost 2 strands of hair, and now he was glancing at the heretic king's neck. It was a shallow wound that almost pierced through his throat. As expected of Senior. How troublesome. Kamikaze sighed regretfully. "I thought that we had met our match and were stuck together like glue. I didn't expect our relationship to be so fragile. Senior, are you going to abandon me just because of a small problem? Aren't you a little too heartless? If you want to die, you can do so at any time." The heretic king ignored the teasing and mockery in his words, and only warned him coldly. "Don't get in the way. Don't worry. As the saying goes, fate is determined by the heavens. Since Senior wants to leave, I won't cry and beg you to stay. You can leave now." Kamikaze stroked the beard on his chin and muttered to himself. Suddenly, he laughed and was full of anticipation. "But, Senior, will you be at ease to show your back to someone like me? Even if it's just for a moment?" At his waist, the sword had already been sheathed, but it was still crying out hungrily. An endless ferocious aura was bound in the darkness, and it kept rising. It couldn't wait any longer. In the distance, the starry sky swayed. A ray of light flew down, and the urging of the golden dawn came again. It was crushed by the heretic king expressionlessly. "Look, someone's getting impatient. Hurry up and invite him in, Senior." Kamikaze stretched out his hand and pressed on the hilt of his sword. His expectant smile became twisted and ferocious, revealing the nature of an evil spirit. "I can't wait any longer. I'll send you on your way." In the dead silence, the heretic king didn't speak. He only gently exhaled the breath in his lungs. Once again, he clenched his right fist and raised it. As if he was holding a pestle, he grasped the invisible power of the heavens and the earth and aimed it at the smiling face from afar. In the dark night sky above them, a loud noise suddenly sounded. It was the ruler from hell rushing past. The power of the storm totem flashed, and the endless lightning flew straight to the stars in the distance without stopping. All that was left was a loud noise and a flash of light. It illuminated the eyes of the two people. There was also the same cruel expression. The land that had been reduced to a desert once again wailed. Under the collision of souls and wills, the land cracked inch by inch and ripples spread. Disregarding life and death, in that instant, the battle to the death began once again, and such a battle had now spread throughout the entire reality. Everything was shrouded in the counterattack of the abyss. The intensity of the battle was rising at a terrifying speed. The deaths and sacrifices could no longer be counted. Instead, they became a series of constantly expanding numbers that appeared in front of the chess players on both sides. Even if it was just a gamble, a battle that was like a military exercise, the constantly rising loss rate still made people's hair stand on end. There were even people who rejoiced. This was just the evolution of the recorded event. If it was real, how many souls could bear the weight behind the number of sacrifices and losses? At this moment, the center of the battle had slipped from the hands of the chess players and landed on the shoulders of the chess pieces. On the throne that gradually rose to the starry sky, Huaishur felt his soul expanding at an unprecedented speed. When he closed his eyes, he could still see tens of thousands of miles away, overlooking the countless battles and killings. Even if he didn't listen, the wails and roars in the wind never stopped. The wails of the turmoil of all things echoed in his ears. 2 palms and 10 fingers. Wherever they passed, everything seemed to be in the palm of his hand. Without needing to take a step, everything was already far away under his feet. Endless brilliance gradually embraced him, gently holding his arm and bringing him to the sea of stars. Above his head, the stars revolved. Without his orders, the brilliance continued to descend. The framework and laws covered the land of the reality. Storms and meteorites fell, changing the positions of rivers and lakes, filling up rifts, uplifting mountains and rivers, sprinkling rain on the heads of allies, and pouring lava and raging fire into hell. The entire reality realm had become a genuine war fortress. At this moment, the revolving stars suddenly stagnated. The sound of storms and tides suddenly came. The thunder of hell spread, and the giant pillar of the storm totem appeared in the sky. The demon king, the frost moon descendant, smashed into the sea of stars like a meteorite, breaking through the layers of defense and breaking into the core. The suppression of the 24 solar terms, the artillery positions on the ground, the other ascendants that rose into the air, and all the attacks launched by the counterattacks and defensive measures fell on her body. They were as dense as rain, and like rain, they could only fall in vain in front of the body that was covered in countless glorious wounds. She was basically unharmed, and the ruler had already broken into the outer domain of the throne. The frost and moonlight on the blood-stained halberd in her hand appeared. It flew out of her hand and pierced straight toward Huaishur. At such a close distance, seeing Huaishur's face, the frost moon's eyebrows raised slightly, and a regretful expression appeared. What a pity that this wasn't a real battle. What a pity that such a head and corpse couldn't be used as a collection to show off at the banquet. Otherwise, with such a good color, she could definitely make a wine vessel that could be handed down for generations. But then, between her and the good color discovery that she liked, a disgusting face suddenly appeared. It had a bronze complexion, rough skin, a strong body, and well-defined muscles. It had a pair of bull-like eyes, and an excited smile on the corner of its mouth for some reason. "Put down that Huaishur, and come at me if you have any problems." Quafu, the burly giant, who was not inferior to the dwarf king, suddenly appeared in midair. He threw out the fishing rod in his hand, and a thin line easily wrapped around the halberd. Under the pull of the long rod made of Shoyang mountain copper, the halberd was thrown out toward the frost moon. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. Like using an iron chopstick to poke a socket, the terrifying electric light attached to it burst out and swallowed the Quafu whole. In an instant, it was shrouded in destruction. The frost moon coldly snorted, caught the halberd, and rushed toward Huaishur again. But in the dissipating electric light, a thick arm suddenly stretched out, and all the electric light was torn apart wherever it passed. Then, that honest and annoying smile appeared in front of the frost moon again. "Sister, sit down, let's talk about our hearts," the passionate singing, the piercing of the fishing rod, and some kind of indescribable greasy feeling rushed toward her at the same time. "Damn, so annoying!" The frost moon roared and chopped down with the halberd in her hand. "Go away!" 3 minutes later, the frost moon began to regret. Why did she provoke this thing? In terms of attack, the other party couldn't be compared with the disaster of the Thunder Sea at all, but for some reason, his defense was so strong, especially with a layer of wood shell covering his whole body, which became more and more tenacious as it was destroyed. It was like a piece of sticky candy, the kind that had been chewed and had saliva on it. Once stuck, it couldn't be shaken off. If he was just difficult to deal with, it would be fine, but he also had a mouth that kept talking. "Gala, how long are you going to be stupid?" the frost moon roared. "I'm busy, don't bother me." The response was an even more impatient roar. Chapter 1153. On the other side, in the surging river of blood, skeletons continued to appear. A large group from a fallen country, the famous Bone Burial Legion, appeared here. Those countless skeletons crawled out of the river of blood and gathered in one place, piling up into a mountain, forming a strange and deformed giant skeleton. The skull that was like a building wore a bright crown. Dozens of arms stretched out in a disorderly manner, and the deformed legs trampled on the ground without any pattern, crawling and crawling. There was no defense, allowing the enemy to exhaust their strength and carry out attacks that overestimated their capabilities. It just moved forward, walking coldly through the tens of thousands of troops, passing through the forest-like legions and large groups of formations. Everything rotted into mud under the spreading miasma and fierce poison. Wherever it passed, its heavy body squeezed the soil and earth, digging out deep trenches. Blood surged in them, extending forward with the giant skeleton. It charged straight forward, towards the core of the present realm. It did not care about other opponents at all. It only focused on searching for traces of celestial genealogy. But now, the fortress-like skeleton in the river of blood was suddenly hugged by a pair of thick arms. It hugged it tightly, and the arms contracted inwards. Then it pulled up. The mountain formed from countless mud and rocks actually grew limbs and took on the shape of a human. Just like that, it hugged the undying monster of hell enthusiastically, lifting it up and carrying it on its shoulders. It even patted the position of its butt twice, as if it wanted to try the feeling. The sound was crisp. Then, under the witness of the entire world, it used a standard that made one's hair stand on end. Bomb drop. In midair, the undying formed by countless skeletons fell into a daze. It only felt the hurricane blowing in its face, and the ground that was rapidly smashing towards its face. Boom! Countless bones spurted out like a waterfall and scattered. Those scattered bones quickly shrank, trying to absorb the power of the river of blood to form again. Then, everyone saw a strange smile appear on Shan Luan's blurry face. Just like that, it took 2 steps back and another 2 steps back. It retreated 10 steps away, and then, it ran towards the opponent that was rapidly recovering in front of it. Amidst the wailing of the earth's crust, he suddenly leaped up. The huge mass carried by the jump caused the ground to undulate and shake like a spring bed. In the air, the mountain giant opened its arms and legs, casting a terrifying shadow over the skull of the skeleton, causing the ferocious face to fall into a daze. After that, it was an earth-shattering fall. Meteor shower. A terrifying impact that was even more powerful than a nuclear explosion landed on the countless skeletons. Even the river of blood was dried up by this terrifying impact, unable to continue flowing. The bones that had turned into dust quickly shrank and were reborn. Gala's face appeared among the skeletons. "What the F***ck is this? Of course it's a pure man's way of fighting." In the reborn mountain range, an old face appeared from the top, the giant of the American world, Traltacutli. He raised his thick arms and peeled off the outermost layer of soil and stone shell of the mountain range, as if he was tearing off his coat. Countless rocks quickly formed the outline of strong muscles. In accordance with his will, he put on a strong and powerful posture. He was sweating profusely. Just like that, he laughed strangely and reached out to grab the opponent in front of him. "Come on, friend, don't be in a hurry to leave." Traltacutli hugged his neck and held it tightly. He warmly invited, "Our wrestling has just begun. Get lost." Gala roared. It wasn't because he couldn't win, nor was it because of strategy or anything else, but because this old man was so strange. Is this how the wrestling in the present realm works? Why is it different from what I know? Isn't there something wrong with it? Also, I didn't King look for you. Where's Ing Fangzhou? Ing Fangzhou, where did you go, you bastard? Don't run, come out and face me. On the other side, in front of the Celestial Genealogy Outpost Network, Ing Fangzhou, who was guarding here, also felt some kind of disgust from the bottom of his heart. Right in front of him, the group leader from the Eternal World Group was wearing a solemn black suit and a pair of exquisite leather shoes. He wore gold-rimmed glasses, his hair was meticulously combed, and he was carrying a briefcase in his hand. He didn't hide at all. "Are you Ing Fangzhou?" The sales champion of the business department in the Deep Zone stopped in front of him. He reached out and adjusted his glasses. After taking a closer look, he showed a disdainful look. "You don't look like much." Ing Fangzhou pulled out his gun expressionlessly. He didn't even bother to respond. But then, he saw the opponent in front of him suddenly take a step back. Then, he pushed down the gold mountain and jade pillars. Crisp, smooth, and extremely skilled, he knelt down. With a thud, the sales champion knelt on the ground. Suddenly, tears streamed down his face. He cried and shouted. He stretched out his hands and hugged Ing Fangzhou's thigh tightly, refusing to let go. "Wait a minute, Dad!" The sales champion kowtowed fiercely and shouted, "Dad, please, you are my dad. Please, take a look at our products." His tears and snot spurted out. He tried his best to plead in a hoarse voice, "Our Eternal World Group is absolutely good at a reasonable price. We are absolutely honest. Dad, we and Celestial Genealogy are old acquaintances. There is still a discount now, go to hell." Originally, this extremely funny clown should have been completely evaporated in an instant. But when the pair of hands picked up a thick proposal and raised it in front of him, Ing Fangzhou's movements suddenly stopped. In the sales champion's cries, some kind of emotion and hesitation that shouldn't have appeared in his heart, breaking the original pure state of mind. Instead, it was replaced by a thought that made Ing Fangzhou's hair stand on end. He is so pitiful and humble. He looks very sincere. Why don't I take pity on him and take a look? Killing intent and hesitation constantly appeared on that face. Struggle. In the flattering smile, humble pleading, and the pleading of the sales champion, the pure will began to gradually dull. Bit by bit, with difficulty, he reached out his hand towards the product catalog in front of him. He flipped open a page. Desire. Endless materialistic desire and greed emerged from the product catalog. It was sticky and wriggling, crawling along the fingers and crawling towards Ing Fangzhou's body. It seeped into his soul. "Take your time. Don't worry at all." The sales champion, with tears and snot, revealed a sincere smile. He took out one thick catalog after another from the briefcase beside him. "I also brought 20 different sets. Take your time to look and choose. As long as you pay a little bit of origin substance, there will be a beautiful gift package." Just like that, he happily admired the customer's appearance as he looked at the catalog, chose the products, and looked forward to the future. Take a look. In the endless materialistic desire, he gradually became addicted. He gradually overdrew. He gradually became greedy. He endlessly possessed and bought. From money to material things to his life to his body. In the end, he even pawned his soul. The feast of desire had just begun. Pa! A crisp sound came from Ing Fangzhou's body. The sales champion raised his head in confusion and saw that the face was cracking under the erosion of the curse of greed. However, even more greed and desire emerged from the broken face. It was like an ocean, boundless and endless. Even the sales champion was dumbfounded by the desire. He was stunned. "You must be joking." Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. He felt as if he had ignited the fuse of an explosives warehouse. The flames were clearly spreading as he had imagined, but why did he feel so terrified and uneasy? Wait a minute, was this really the sharp blade of the Utopia? Or could it be that he was mistaken? However, the opponent in front of him was clearly Ing Fangzhou. But since it was Ing Fangzhou, why was there such a huge greed and desire in the resurrected soul? It was simply insatiable. At this moment, in Ing Fangzhou's hands, even the catalogue that recorded all the products and the essence of calamities in hell began to tremble violently. It moved without any wind and flipped at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. One book after another. They were burned to ashes in the flames of Yun Zhongjuan's desire. In the end, in the scattered ashes, the expressionless face raised again and looked down at the dazed sales champion. Lightning surged. "What a pity!" Ing Fangzhou sighed regretfully. "You don't seem to be able to buy what I want here." Wait, I have more here." Boom! Tens of thousands of furious thunderbolts rose from the ground and rose into the sky. In front of Ing Fangzhou there was only a pitch-black deep pit left. Amidst countless flying dust, a burning leather shoe fell from the air and fell into the mud in the distance. The clown was finally dead. Not even his bones were left. However, his goal had still been achieved. He had been delayed here by Yun Zhongjuan, and the other party had completed the blockade. Even further away, the earth was shaking. The dark clouds in the sea of lightning spread. The huge saucer of decay spread its 8 pairs of giant wings and sprinkled green scale powder like a rainstorm. Wherever the scale powder passed, endless ghosts crawled out of the green fire and gathered into a tide, rushing toward the outpost behind Ing Fangzhou. The wind that blew against his face carried the familiar smell of blood. It was so thick with the long-lost smell of death. There was also the stench of the abyss. Behind him, there was only an empty outpost. The closest reinforcement had been completely cut off. He was alone outside. The world that he once wanted to protect had long been turned into ruins, leaving only lonely ghosts like himself wandering endlessly in hell. For a moment, he seemed to have returned to 70 years ago. Everything was so familiar, so similar. But this time, he was no longer as furious and indignant as before. Instead, for some reason, he laughed out loud. He was so satisfied, so happy. He didn't need to look back to feel the light from the stars in the sky. Those lights shone on his shoulder again. Just like a long time ago. Gentle and bright. It was as if the era that belonged to them had returned again. Everything that he wanted to protect had come to him again. "This time, please, look at me," Yun Zhongjuan smiled and pleaded softly to the souls of the past. Just like that, he pulled out the water of hatred and looked up at the endless large group and army in the distance with contempt. He hooked his finger. This was the final declaration of war. Come. Chapter 1154. The distant night sky was torn apart by thunder. The pure, blazing radiance rose into the night sky, splitting open the endless darkness and penetrating the approaching dark clouds, galloping mightily. The lightning was like a plow, digging out deep fissures from the ground and rising into the sky again, forming a cage that locked in all directions, trapping the hordes of hell and the strange rotten giant butterflies in the clouds. In the thunder that looked down on all things, Yun Zhongjuan's figure appeared. The blazing light that filled the sky was gathered in his hand, turning into a long river that swept through the projection of the abyss. Huai Shi was subconsciously distracted and glanced at that direction, but his eyes were stung by the unpleasant lightning. He seemed to hear a cold snort from Ing Fangzhou. Just do your own thing well and that's enough. I'll take it that you're concerned about me. Huai Shi sighed, withdrew his gaze, and focused on the operation of the great secret ritual. A shrill whistle flew past his ears, cutting off a few strands of hair and disappearing into the distant night sky. The dwarf king, Shuangyue, had fallen into a rage. The mighty power of the storm totem kept descending, but it was all in vain under Quafu's entanglement and the operation of the 24 solar terms. Now, the two sides were fighting more than 10 kilometers away. For the ruler, this distance was no different from being right in front of him. However, he couldn't get past Quafu, the meat shield, and the unreasonable fishing rod in his hand. The thin line stretched for thousands of miles, and the golden hook caught everything. Whether it was all tangible weapons, or invisible flames and storms, under the pull of the hook and line, all became big fish that were hooked, and could not break through the boundary. Was that supreme? Or something else? It was impossible to tell. It could only be said that it was really an eye-opener. He clearly looked like a simpleton, but this kind of terrifying skill seemed to be at his fingertips, not leaving the slightest gap for the enemy. From time to time, he would look back and give Huai Shi a thumbs up, blinking and smiling brightly. The meaning was straightforward and simple. Look at me, am I awesome? Then, when he was distracted, Shuangyue's axe directly hit his face. Metal and skull collided, bursting out a loud sound like a bell. Quafu, on the other hand, just took a step back and wiped his face, and everything was quickly restored to normal. Everything was quickly returning to normal. After attacking with all his might for so long, even a person would be exhausted to death. However, this guy's face wasn't red, nor was he panting, nor was he sweating at all. He was like a perpetual motion machine with terrifyingly high endurance. No wonder he was listed as a support in the Eastern Summer System. Huai Shi couldn't help but want to exchange such a good tool for foreign exchange. The operation of the Great Secret Ritual had its own set of rules, with the Continuation Academy's infinite schemes. Huai Shi didn't need to worry about the promotion process at all. All he needed to do was play his role as a mascot and be safely sent into the Great Secret Ritual's central hub. This matter would naturally be completed, which was why he dared to let his imagination run wild. But in that moment of distraction, the distant sky was suddenly ignited by a spark of fire. Then, scarlet red filled the air. The huge meteor dragged a flaming tail behind it as it fell from the night sky. Endless blood dripped from it, dyeing half of the night sky a nauseating dark red. Just like that, he brazenly barged into the realm's domain. He locked on to Huai Shi. It strangely made several turns in the air, and after throwing aside all the intercepting cannons, it smashed down towards the stars. And without any warning, a huge square shield projection appeared in front of the blood-colored meteor, blocking the terrifying impact. In front of Huai Shi, a trail of molten metal flashed by, wiping out countless large groups. A skinny figure had already blocked in front of him. All of the attackers were kept at bay. He wore an ancient helmet on his head, and his mane and feather crown fluttered in the wind, burning like fire. The old man was wearing heavy ring armor, with a short sword at his waist. The spear in his hand was burning with flames, and his cloak fluttered in the wind as he galloped. As he came and went, the giant beasts and hunting angels released by Paradise were torn apart and pierced through. And in the distance, the meteors and blazing lights that were constantly smashing down were all blocked by the square shield in his hand, leaving no gap for him to take advantage of. Rome's genealogy, the god of war, Mars. After 4 generations of emperors, he had been the mainstay of Rome's genealogy since 90 years ago, and now he was blocking in front of hell. He just turned around and glanced at Huai Shi, nodded slightly, and did not say anything else. On his scarred face, the remaining right eye was covered in white. It had long been turbid and dim under the tempering of time, but at this moment, when facing the enemy, it burst out with a sharp glow like iron. as if tens of thousands of troops were following him. Endless phantoms filled the sky, and the thick square formation that had been passed down for thousands of years enveloped Huai-Shur. He was the only one left standing on top of the only gap. Expressionlessly, he killed all the solidifiers and monsters that dared to rush up. The surging river of blood swept over from the end of the sky dome. The figure of the giant blood-colored snake rose up. After breaking through Fusang's interception, the fallen country and the blessed land joined forces and rushed deep in, not caring about the price they had to pay. They attacked the foundation of the great secret apparatus. An unprecedented, terrifying pressure descended, and the flames of war spread. Almost every inch of land had been dyed red with blood, and the entire plain had become a chaotic battlefield. And more importantly, countless alarms suddenly flashed in front of Huai-Shur's eyes. Error reporting. Dozens of errors appeared in the originally fixed cycle between the 5 layers of domains at the same time. In addition to the black box, realm of eternity, that connected the 3 pillars in the deepest layer, there were 4 layers of domains that extended out: activity, formation, creation, and outflow. There were 7 stages of internal measurement, 36 days of functional modules, and a total of 91 internal regions. There were unfamiliar signals and permissions that were not within the scope of recognition at all. The ascension came to an abrupt end. In a daze, Huai-Shur discovered that another permission had appeared in the great secret apparatus. The second administrator account was rapidly stealing all of Huai-Shur's permissions. Not only was it usurping the control of the great secret apparatus, it was even trying to invade the Book of Destiny. What the hell? Huai-Shur watched as strands of darkness appeared from the outermost layer of the great secret apparatus, quickly corroding the domain of the great secret apparatus. Even the antivirus program was unable to detect it. Was this thing's firewall so fragile? But even if it could hide from the great secret apparatus's firewall, it was still unable to avoid the Book of Destiny's observation. In that instant, a new framework that had never been recorded in the great secret apparatus quietly appeared in the dense structure on the title page. Its name was World. Alistair's hoarse laughter seemed to ring in his ears once more. Under the protection of Woodman's serpent-wing halo and the strange old man's robes, countless origin substance leads extended out, entering the void and connecting to the great secret apparatus. They seeped into the cycle of the realm of reality, and that stooped body seemed to dissolve, gradually becoming thinner and thinner. In the end, only faint traces were left behind. It was as transparent as a bubble, and under the translucent body, countless laws of disaster surged, interweaving into an artificial soul that belonged to hell. Now, it finally no longer concealed its essence and origin. This was the Chosen One. Chosen One, Theon, Savior. No, its true meaning should be the Chosen One. The so-called Alistair was a combination of the abilities of all the members of the Golden Dawn, as well as all the legacies of the utopia that they had mastered, and the tools and results that they had carefully created. Long before its birth, all the purposes of its design were built around the realm of reality. It was just like copying the power of the Rainbow Bridge, using disaster as the foundation to become an abyss stairway to heaven that connected countless hells. The existence of the tower was the foundation of a place that was isolated from the world. Its mission and function was to mobilize the fulcrum and center of the forces in all directions, supporting the operation of the stairway to heaven. Now that the stairway to heaven no longer existed, it could only be completely abandoned. Instead, it was replaced by the world that was built for the great secret apparatus. It was a key used to open, seize, and control the first seal, Zarathustra. At this moment, in his hand, the framework unfolded, penetrated the layers of verification from the great secret apparatus, and began to spread the poison and infection from the abyss. Reversing the nature of all frameworks towards hell, the reverse blessing was applied to the rulers. It didn't matter if it was called the Hell's Matrix, or the abyss matrix. This was the solidified law that was meticulously built for the realm of reality. In this sudden change, not only the chess players, but even the spectators in the decision-making room fell into a daze. They didn't know whether they should be angry or glad. They were angry that those bastards from the Golden Dawn had actually come up with such a technology, but they were glad that this was only a gamble. If they didn't notice it for a moment and it was used in the real realm of reality, of course, the difference in size between the two was more than 10,000 times, and the consequences were more than 10,000 times worse. If this place was an empty shell and a container, then the realm of reality was a heavy fruit. As long as a crack appeared in the erosion of the Golden Dawn and it was slightly pried open, the result would be unimaginable. But now, the key was how to stop the erosion of the Golden Dawn, even if Huaishur didn't care. The great secret apparatus was definitely not a toy that could be taken advantage of. Without the support of the Land of Dreams, the enemy could only circle around the outermost layer and interfere with the process and progress of the ascension. But if the enemy followed the connection of the great secret apparatus and reversed the erosion and interference of the pillars such as Fusang, the Pantheon, and the Solar Almanac, then the foundation of the realm of reality would be completely shaken. We must seal the enemy's range of activity within the outer layer of the great secret apparatus. Do you understand, Huaishur? The voice of the creator of the Middle Island kept coming. Just follow the emergency plan in the manual. First, set the Realm of Eternity's black box to output mode and adjust the distribution. Then, we can freeze the things within the outer layer and seal the inner layer. The most important thing now is to find out where the enemy is. Turn on all the intelligence verification and origin substance identification systems. Turn it on. Huaishur's entire body was numb. It's not working. The verification and identification systems set up by the Survival Institute couldn't stop the sniffing of Golden Dawn at all. All the verification from the great secret apparatus itself was ineffective. At the end of the day, these bastards were far too familiar with the structure and inner layer of the great secret apparatus. The verification and inspection procedures of the great secret instrument were essentially to screen out all existences that did not belong to the body and produce a rejection reaction against all intruders. The materials used for verification and identification also came from within the great secret apparatus. But under the erosion of the Hell's Matrix, they were completely ineffective. Now, when the automatic mode was useless, they could only switch to manual mode. Huaishur could only hurriedly deal with the various error reporting programs that popped up, then throw everything that could be used into the verification database. He didn't even have time to look at it. But the situation was still slowly deteriorating, bringing about waves of torment. Until suddenly, an ear-piercing alarm sounded. External intrusion detected. Huaishur lowered his head in confusion and looked at the document in his hand that he had just picked up. What the hell? It's working? Even Nakajima, who was watching from the sidelines, was stunned. Huaishur, how did you do it? He asked in shock. Which verification framework did you use to find the other side? None of them. Huaishur looked at the document in his hand that he had pulled out from the Book of Destiny. His expression twitched. It's probably Eastern Summer Republic Road Traffic Safety Law? Nakajima fell silent. At the same time, Alistair looked at the verification program in front of him and fell into a daze. The permitted vehicle type is a small automatic transmission vehicle. Which type of vehicle can you drive? A low-speed cargo vehicle. B. Low-speed passenger vehicle. C. Two-wheeled motorcycle. D. Low-speed automatic transmission vehicle. The countdown of 60 seconds began. What the hell? In his unprecedented confusion, the candidate from Golden Dawn began to think for the first time in his life, what the hell was an automatic transmission? Chapter 1155. At this moment, inside the Great Arcana, Alistair, who had dissolved into a framework state, began to think. Ever since it was born in the core of the land of dreams, it had experienced the teachings of the Creator and the influence of countless records. For the first time in its life, the world, which had been entrusted with a heavy responsibility, had never been confused before. Car? Weren't cars a common means of transportation in the present world? But automatic? What the F***ck is automatic? He searched his own database but found that he couldn't find any relevant records at all. Why? Why would there be such a boring verification question in the world? Astronomy, geography, chemistry, physics, even the most obscure crystal extraction in alchemy was involved in the records of the land of dreams. The so-called world was a master key created by the great arcana from the very beginning. But the heavens pitted him, driving? If there was a skill that absolutely could not be used in Golden Dawn, it was probably driving. Wasn't the stairway to heaven good? Now that the countdown was rapidly approaching the end, he began to sweat profusely, as if he was a conservative contestant on a variety show. He didn't know where to start, but there was nothing he could do. He could only ask for outside help. Call for help. He went to ask Bennett, but under the siege of many Tier 5, the awakened in the abyss were also at a loss. Automatic. The monk pondered for a long time and asked curiously, "Is it Osiris's hidden mode?" He went to ask the heretic king, but the heretic king was indifferent from the beginning to the end. Car. The heretic king sneered in the communication, "You think I know how to drive?" Helpless, he could only turn to the last guy who looked more reliable. Woodman. Is there something wrong with your brain, idiot? One of the few awakened in Golden Dawn who had driving experience was furious. Automatic is a car that automatically switches gears. I knew that you test tube babies in petri dishes would go wrong sooner or later. You can't even drive a car, what's the use? At this point, Alistair couldn't care less about Woodman's contempt. He asked straightforwardly, "Then which one should I choose?" "How would I know? Back then, I got my driver's license through the Astronomy Association's special line." Woodman slowed down for a moment in the chaotic battle, and half of his head was almost burned off by the solar almanac's halo. He impatiently scolded, "Can't you use your brain? Backward compatibility? Since you already have a driving license, why can't you drive a motorcycle?" Alistair was stunned. It seems as if perhaps this is the truth? Just as the countdown was about to end, Alistair no longer hesitated and decisively chose the answer. C. Wrong. The shrill sound of the alarm instantly exploded among the stars. Before Alistair could react, the frame in front of him had already locked down, completely closing in on him. Immediately afterward, the heavy pressure from the great secret apparatus descended, and the secret apparatus of the firewall swept past, instantly cutting off Alistair's spreading contamination and locking him down almost instantly. What the hell? In the outflow area, the world's framework dodged and quickly transformed. The authority he had just obtained disappeared without a trace, which made Alistair furious. Woodman, you ****, however, before he could react, new verification questions were quickly installed in the interfaces of each framework. Countless questions popped up in front of him between the countless forks. Can you directly apply for a large truck driver's license in your temporary residence for the first time? Is driving a motor vehicle in violation of road traffic safety laws and regulations and causing a traffic accident a violation? Please determine how many violations the red motor vehicle in the picture has committed. Countless messy questions popped up in front of Alistair's eyes, causing his originally calm mood to quickly become impetuous, and his anger to rise uncontrollably. Mother****, why sure you dog, you're not human anymore. Where the hell did all these verification questions come from? But any verification question that could be installed in the great secret apparatus must have the correct answer, otherwise the other internal frames would not be able to interact normally. And it must be a record of events that had not been tampered with, and there must be an answer and a widely accepted implementation method in reality, Alistair would never have dreamed that what stopped him was not the remnants and fruits of painstaking effort left behind by the previous creators, but the first subject that was soaked in the blood and tears of countless Dongsha drivers. But even so, these questions were still not difficult for him. He only needed to change his strategy and his own structure, and observe the results when the other frames interacted with each other, and he would be able to record the correct answer. But just as he recorded the 1400th question, he found that the new verification questions were starting to become more and more strange. After Huai Shi found that the records in his Book of Destiny could be recognized by the Great Secret Apparatus, the level of strangeness of the verification began to rise crazily in a straight line. How many Muzai-class cruisers did John's side deploy in the Battle of Gundam? What the F***CK is Gundam? Where did John come from? Is there such a war in the world? I know about cruisers, but what the F***CK is a Muzai-class cruiser? Which character's VA is not Nakamura Yuichi? What the F***CK, Nakamura Yuichi? Don't these characters all look the F***king same? Is there a difference other than the hair color? Is there? Please select a Tang actor from the following options as the Emperor. Who the hell knows? And why did the Emperor of Dongxia choose this actor? Can't you just change to another one? Someone has come to buy melons. How many phrases of Sarilang have appeared in the above video? Enough, I beg you, can you F***king change to a question from the mortal realm? Please select the following photos in which the Prince of Paradise appeared. Why sure, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to F***king kill you. As Alistair roared furiously, a steady stream of warnings popped up from the world frame. If he continued to hesitate like this, he would only be left with fewer and fewer options. When there was no other way out, he would only be caught like a turtle in a jar. He had to go all out. Now the world frame was fully unfurled. Alistair no longer cared about the suppression of the Great Secret Apparatus firewall. Alistair's power circulated among the stars, and began to madly break through the interception of the Creator's frames. After giving up on picking locks, he used a sledgehammer to smash the wall. After losing the concealment measures, he ignored the rapid evaporation and separation of his body and climbed up madly along the branches of the 7 major stages. Towards the Great Secret Apparatus, towards the position where Huai Shi was located. The only administrator authority. Replaced. In less than a few short seconds, he no longer cared about the world, and erupted with all his strength, completely destroying the firewall's interception and frame verification. Wherever he passed, he left a grayish-black trail among the stars, breaking straight into the inner part. It was like a hot knife through butter. Even through the final barrier, he could already see the shock and astonishment in Huai Shi's soul. Is he afraid? But it's too late. Alistair sneered and broke through the final defense in horror, moving forward. In that instant, after the shattered blockade, billowing darkness rushed towards him. In the vast darkness, the faint sound of a heartbeat could be heard, as if there was something strange, a faint buzzing sound. Alistair's shock came suddenly. He widened his eyes and felt something sticky, moist, and full of thirst pounce on his face. In an instant it spread. What is this? In the frame of the world, an unprecedented alarm sounded. A pain that he had never experienced before emerged from his soul. His body that was originally diluted into origin substance was actually reformed under the devouring of the darkness, and then distortion. A tragic scream sounded from the depths of the darkness. Soon it was engulfed by the darkness again. Ah, this! Huai Shi was stunned for a long time before he reacted. He couldn't help but scratch his head, not knowing whether to praise Alistair's courage or doubt his brain. So brave! He was dumbfounded. As expected of the Golden Dawn, admirable, admirable. The current Huaishur was an inseparable part of the Great Secret apparatus. As the Great Sea Ming, he had completely merged into the stars in the sky, and the part he formed was the unique ultimate of the Great Sea Ming himself. He originally thought that he had deliberately placed this thing in the core so that the Golden Dawn would hesitate to attack. But he didn't expect that Alistair would jump into Huaishur's trap without even frowning, and even generously spread out his frame. Everyone knew that there could only be one thing in the King of Donwa's ultimate. The flesh of the eternal beast, the remnant of the element of destruction, the eternal creature of the world, the symbol of endless vitality, the crystallization of endless distortion and corrosion. It was the evil result of the experiment that Woodman had set up in the land of Donwa. He originally wanted to return this thing in its original form. He even purposely revealed a lot of flaws. But he didn't expect that Alistair would be the first to open this package. Since it's the Golden Dawn anyway, it's not much different. Huaishur waved his hand generously, looking at the surging darkness in the ultimate. I'll give it to you. The only response he got was a hoarse roar. The power of the Great Secret apparatus was added to it, turning the ultimate into a complete cage, sealing Alistair inside. In a sense, Alistair had fulfilled his wish. He had indeed come to Huaishur's position, and even went deeper than that, and was even closer to controlling the authority of the present. There was only this last line that could never be broken through. Just like that, Huaishur closed the door of the ultimate expressionlessly, turned around, and smiled slightly at Woodman, who was glaring at him from afar. He raised his finger and gently brushed it across his throat. He didn't hide his malice and hatred at all. We'll find out sooner or later, friend. He reminded softly, this is just the beginning. Chapter 1156. He was simply overestimating himself. Witnessing Huaishur's provocation, Woodman only sneered and did not say anything. What was there to fear about a guy who could only stand in front of him by relying on the secret ritual? Under the suppression of the almanac, Death Angel Samuel's winged serpent wheel suddenly activated. He ignored the angry rebuke of the tax official and directly extracted a huge amount of death essence from the blood river. A higher level of essence appeared in the endless calamity ash. Just like salt, countless snow-like powder gathered in his hand and formed a strange spear. From thousands of miles away, it was thrown at Huaishur's face. Thus, a rain of death fell from the sky. Countless bone spears accompanied the rain of blood as they fell from the sky. Everywhere they passed, the land was barren. There were countless casualties, but all the deaths became a new source of power. Black cloud-like flying locusts crawled out from the dry land. They spread their wings and sprinkled the poison of death. At this moment, taking advantage of the brief pause of the secret ritual, the ruler of the Blood River suddenly revealed his incarnation. Countless long snakes flew out of the Blood River and bit the hunchbacked officiant of Paradise Earth. They drilled into the Blood River. The next moment, they broke through Mars's obstruction and drilled out of the vortex that appeared out of nowhere. The two rulers worked together and suddenly attacked ruthlessly. The moment they appeared, the blood snakes coiled and formed a wall, using their bodies to isolate Mars. Paradise Earth's officiant had already raised his eyes. Boundless greed and appetite surged from the pair of pitch-black eyes. In the end, a holy light rose. Paradise Earth's miracle descended. The giant mouth of the abyss appeared and opened towards Huaishur, revealing the endless darkness that led to the bottom of the abyss. So despicable? Huaishur raised his eyes. He was not afraid. Instead, he saw that Woodman did not take the bait and felt slightly regretful. Fortunately, I am not a gentleman, following his words. Under his feet, on the dark land, a fierce light appeared on the steel face. The armor rumbled and the engines spouted. The overload drive began. The behemoth that had been waiting for a long time broke free from the shackles of gravity. 6 light wings spread out and spewed out endless flames towards the sky and the stars. Then, he flew out towards his enemy. When a majestic silhouette appeared in the dissipating mist and dust, not only Paradise Earth's officiant, but even the blood snake and woodman in the distance could not help but feel a chill run down their spines. His hair stood on end. Osiris, the giant of the underworld. After a moment of horror, it was replaced by mockery and fury after being treated with such contempt. How much longer are you going to play this King game? Scram! Paradise Earth's officiator stretched out his hand expressionlessly and pressed down. The holy light pierced down like a blade. The high temperature of the holy light, comparable to a solar flare, instantly incinerated the illusions that were not even worth mentioning, revealing the gigantic armor hidden within. Anubis, it's Anubis again, it's this again. I've had enough of this senseless trick. Even so, the steel giant that rose into the air did not retreat or evade the burning streams of light, allowing the terrible heat to instantly reduce countless armors to dust. A deep crack suddenly appeared on Anubis' face. Behind the burning eyes, there was only a gloomy world, endless fog, and even the surging Styx. The sound of waves surged out. In the blink of an eye, Anubis silently collapsed, shattered, and fused into the Styx, vanishing without a trace. It was as if Madame Chen's roar could be heard. Amidst the sound of waves, the roar of steel could be heard. Thus, without any warning, the forbidden program was activated. It directly abandoned the normal mode and overload mode, stepping into the extremely dangerous Styx drive mode. If it was not careful, not only Anubis, but even the driver himself would not be able to escape the restraints of the Styx, dissolving in that eternal death. But now, it was as if Anubis had already tried this countless times. It was already familiar with all the changes, flashing inside and outside the Styx with great familiarity. In a short moment, dozens of deep jumps interweaved into the waves of the Styx. The mighty Styx flowed above the vault of heaven, penetrating the blazing holy light like an illusion. The destructive light engulfed it but could not harm it at all. The projection of the Styx extended straight under Anubis' feet, opening up a path in the midst of self-destruction, instantly blocking in front of Huaishur. The mouth of the abyss was penetrated by the Styx. It was torn apart. In the surging waves, in the river that seemed to lead to eternal silence and destruction, only a steel arm suddenly stretched out, quickly reassembling, 5 fingers spread open. No, this was Paradise Earth's officiator's expression changed greatly. He took a step back, Paradise Earth's door appeared, engulfing him, and he quickly disappeared. But between Anubis' 5 fingers, countless electric sparks burst out, the armor fell off, the high-frequency power blade module popped out, tearing apart all the defenses like a hot knife through butter. Ignoring the fact that Paradise Earth's door was rapidly closing, it pierced through. It grabbed Paradise Earth's officiator in its palm. Pulled out. Then, the 5 fingers contracted. Puff. Like crushing a soft persimmon, a viscous scarlet residue was squeezed out. Next, flames ignited between the 5 fingers, quickly burning the residue of the officiator. Hoarse screams and terrified wails came from the wind. But no matter how much he struggled, he could not escape the punishment of hell. In the end, he was reduced to ashes. There was no trace left. Just like this, in just 2 short flicks of the fingers, the officiator from Paradise Earth was crushed into meat paste in Anubis' hands. Dead silence. A sudden dead silence. A long-lost chill lingered in everyone's heart, causing their breathing to stop. Was this really Anubis? In all the identification and observation of the probing mirror, the opponent in front of them should be the Anubis from celestial genealogy. But this murderous aura, the trembling from the depths of their souls, and the combat style that was completely different from before, this was clearly, sorry, I haven't used it for so many years, I'm a little rusty. In the dead silence, only a clear male voice rang out, I'm not late, am I? No, you're not. Huaishur replied with a smile. I was still thinking about how to introduce you to everyone. But now, it seems that there's no need for that, right? But, there's someone here who needs you to specifically greet. As he spoke, he raised his hand. In his hand, the heavy steel book trembled slightly, as if it was crying. Long time no see, my friend. You? How are you? 15 minutes ago, on the silent wilderness, there was blood everywhere. The exhausted Anubis trekked among the bones of the giant beast. In the cockpit, other than the ticking of the instruments, there was only heavy breathing. The battle was too long, and the battle was too tragic. Even Anubis felt that he had reached his limit. Madame Chen raised her head, drank the strong liquor in the pot that could be used as fuel, and wiped the sweat off her forehead. The computing unit embedded in her skull was beginning to overheat. This was really F***king enough. Before she could catch her breath, she heard the signal for help ring again. There were more battles and battles waiting in the distance. There's really an endless amount of work to do, an endless amount of grinding. She clicked her tongue, scratched her wet hair, and complained helplessly, "Russell, you old bastard, after this trip, you should at least give me a month's leave. I won't do it if it's 1 day less." Unfortunately, the main character couldn't respond at all. There were only countless supportive comments on the internal forum. This time, shouts were heard from behind Anubis. It was hurried and awkward. In the distance, next to the scrapped motorcycle that was emitting thick smoke, an embarrassed rider stood on tiptoe and shouted at Anubis, "Wait, Xiaowen, wait!" Madame Chen was stunned for a moment. She hadn't heard this nickname for a long time, which she had been extremely resistant to since decades ago. After a brief moment of shock, she couldn't help but fly into a rage. She suddenly turned around. "You F***king," her words came to an abrupt end. She was stunned on the spot. The moment she saw that face, she almost thought she was hallucinating. But some inexplicable impulse made her stand up and open the cockpit. She didn't care that this might be a conspiracy from hell. She widened her eyes. She forgot to breathe. Under Anubis's feet, the young man in the motorcycle jacket was waving at her. It was as if they had returned to their childhood when they first met. The long time and separation didn't seem to have changed him at all. His short blonde hair was still like the sun, shining in her eyes. He was like a hero who walked out of the light. Shining. "Sorry, I don't know where Beelzebub went." The young man hugged the helmet and scratched his head awkwardly. He smiled and said, "Can I trouble you to give me a ride?" In the long silence, Chen Jingwen stared at him blankly. After a long time, she nodded hard. "Okay," she said. Her heart was filled with gratitude and joy for the reunion, but she couldn't help but want to cry. Anytime, Mr. Orton." Then, a gentle hand rubbed her hair. "Just like when they met in the past." "Then, let's go." He smiled and took her hand. "Let's go to our friends." Chen Jingwen nodded and wiped away her tears. Once again, she held on to the corner of his clothes and followed behind him. Just like back then. She chased after the figure and stepped into the place where he went. Now, in the waves of the Nether River, the burning steel giant spread its wings of light and stood in the starry sky again. It declared its existence to the rulers of hell in front of it. In the dead silence inside and outside the chessboard, the vice principal stared at the back of the long-lost figure in a daze. After a long time, he smiled silently and whispered softly, "Welcome back, uncle." The steel giant looked up as if he was smiling. He looked down at the world in front of him, towards hell, and the best friends who had fought side by side and the enemies who were now irreconcilable. Just like that, he held the dragon's spear tightly and greeted them. "Everyone, long time no see." Chapter 1157. The earth shook, and the loud noises in the distance did not stop. Thunder continued to spread. In the hurricane, the towering ivory tower shook slightly, but it still stood on the ground. Under the white tower, in the deep darkness, only the lights of countless instruments flickered quietly, illuminating the face of the creator on the recliner. Another thunderous roar. It was so loud. Dust rustled down. Evelyn lowered her head calmly, and used a rod to clean the ashes in the pipe. 2 specks of dust fell into the pipe, causing her to frown. "At least restrain yourself a little." "That guy," a polite knock sounded from behind the door. "Madam Chashel, I hope I didn't disturb you." The purser, who came from the iron crystal seat, stood in front of the door and smiled. He looked around at the medical cabins erected in the darkness, and at the front, the empty cabin that had already been opened. He raised his eyebrows slightly. "Mr. Orton has already gone up?" "Yes." Evelyn lowered her head to fill the pipe and sighed unhappily. He was the first to open his eyes. When he heard that there was going to be a fight, he didn't even bother to put on his pants and ran away on Xiao Ying's motorcycle. She paused for a moment and sighed helplessly. "He doesn't listen to others at all. It's very compatible with the lunatics of the Utopia." "You're an elder and a backbone. Isn't it inappropriate to say that?" Simmons laughed. "Would someone with a normal brain jump into a place that definitely won't have a good ending?" Evelyn shook her head and sneered. "Anyone with a normal brain wouldn't think about these things every day, right?" "I'm a little sad to hear that." Simmons sat beside her. "Back then, I chased after the backs of the seniors and jumped in with longing. Doesn't that mean that your brain is more or less abnormal?" Evelyn glanced at him and was silent for a long time. Then, she chuckled softly. "Actually, everyone is the same," she said. "In the few years after the fall of Heavenly State, I've been in hell. Until my death, I never thought of returning to the present world. Now that I think about it, I actually regret it." "Isn't it because you're disappointed in the others?" Simmons asked. Maybe. The old man pondered and lowered his head to look at the pipe in his hand. The person who gave him the pipe was no longer in this world, just like him. She thought for a long time and said seriously, "But more than that, it's fear and loneliness." "Fear?" Simmons was slightly stunned. "What do you think the people of Utopia are, Simmons?" Evelyn asked. "Heroes? Lunatic? Genius? Or an idiot?" Simmons was speechless, but Evelyn continued to answer, "Actually, it's about the same. In the Utopia, there aren't only good people. Earlier on, there were even maniacs who killed countless people and lunatics who intended to provoke a war between the 5 major factions. Not only were there brilliant geniuses, but there were also irredeemable trash from their personalities to their hobbies. For someone like me, in there, I can only be said to be ordinary." At this point, Evelyn laughed. "In the end, the so-called genius, devil, madman, or other titles are just given to us by others. In the Utopia of the past, it was actually just a bunch of poor homeless people." Simmons was stunned. He opened his mouth to speak, but he could not say a word. "You can't understand, right? It's very normal, Simmons." Evelyn suddenly asked, "Other than the Iron Crystal constellation, is there any other place you want to go?" The purser was silent. After a long time, he slowly shook his head. "That's the place I chose to serve for the rest of my life, madam. Even if I die, I'll leave my ashes on its deck." "That's the home you found for yourself, isn't it?" The old man sighed sympathetically. "Simmons, you can't return to the modern realm, not only because you have lofty aspirations, but also because you can't stand living among a group of ordinary people. This isn't because you're arrogant and cold, but because you don't have any friends there. Even if you're tired, old, and want to retire one day and walk among the crowd, you'll realize that you're completely different from the people around you. What they love, what they hate, their lives, those aren't what you want. Even if you're given endless wealth and power, you'll only feel suffocated, as if you've been thrown into the deep sea. You won't feel happy and blissful because your paradise isn't there. It's the same for us." She leaned back on the recliner and stared down at the flickering flame in the pipe. It was as if she had caught a glimpse of the light of the past. It was so nostalgic. "We want to change this world, not only because of lofty aspirations, but also to satisfy our own selfish desires, to find more companions, more friends, and more of our kind. We have gathered in the vast wilderness to make this world a better place, and to create a home for ourselves. This is the utopia. She smiled and said softly, the home we chose for ourselves, the utopia that belongs to us. It was because of this that they trusted each other and were as close as brothers. It was because of this that after losing, it was so painful. I wandered in hell in despair, stubbornly groped in the abyss, abandoning the ruins of the past behind me. I didn't dare to look again, and I didn't want to recall everything that had happened in the past. I'm so lonely. The dreamlike years of happiness always come to an end easily, don't they? Evelyn chuckled and mocked herself. The beauty and glory of the past are gone, and only the wandering souls of pain and nostalgia are left, filled with pain. Let me ask, how can there be no hatred in our hearts? Following her words, in the darkness, in the medical cabins that looked like tombstones, the sleeping souls opened their eyes. Filled with pain and anger, they stared at the world in front of them. This was the result of Huaishur fully opening up the authority of the Book of Destiny. Using images to record, reshape the souls of the deceased, create the power of the Lord, and give them bodies again. The records from the Book of Destiny, the victims who had died long ago, the homeless stray dogs, the dead who were pushed into the abyss by their trusted companions, had returned to this world once again. Breathing in the air filled with pungent disinfectant. Pushing open the door in front of them, he stepped on the floor with his wet feet. Like a drowning dog that had crawled out of a quagmire, they silently gathered in one place. When they heard the call of their enemies from afar, their expressions became cold and gloomy. There was no longer any gentleness left. Long time no see, everyone. Evelyn took off her pipe, turned around, and smiled at the companion she hadn't seen for a long time. I don't need to say anything unnecessary, our enemies are right there, she said. Do what you need to do. Only silence answered her. The dead souls that crawled out of hell once again silently gathered in formation, walked out of the darkness, received their weapons and orders, and marched towards the battlefield in the distance. For a long time, Evelyn was the only one left in the silence. The old woman quietly sat on her recliner, looked up at the ceiling above her head, as if she could see the endless flames and the scene of slaughter under the stars. Look, my friends. She smiled, sniffed the smell of ashes in her pipe, and wished with all her heart, the enemies have appeared, the traitors have stepped onto the stage, the war that belongs to us has begun once again. Now, under the turbulent starry sky, the river Styx was surging. Anubis opened its mouth and roared silently. The burning sharp blade tore through the endless blood and fell from the sky. The vast brilliance of paradise shattered under the slash of the sharp blade, the dark clouds of the thunder sea were burned up by the flames on the light wings, and wherever the crimson trail passed, everything was cleanly destroyed. The injured blood snakes hissed and went into a frenzy, but the distance between them quickly increased. They could only control countless spells to attack from afar. However, the torrential spells were all annihilated by Anubis's casual slashes. It was hard to imagine that Anubis's destructive power could reach such a level. In just 5 minutes, the proud blood-dark army of the fallen country, the storm personal army of the Thunder Sea, the hunting angels of paradise, and even a large group of people from the endless hell were all annihilated by the slash of the blade. This Motherf Cur, not only the large group of people in the chessboard, even the spectators outside the chessboard couldn't help but feel their hair stand on end. After being forgotten for 70 years, that terrifying deterrent force had returned once again. It caused even the soul to feel cold. It was an Anubis that hadn't changed at all, but when it was in Orton's hands, it was so terrifying that it shocked everyone. Originally, the skills that Madame Churn had honed from countless large groups and battles were already shocking enough, and she was considered a great threat. However, when this armor was accepted by Orton, everyone had a clear understanding of what a real nightmare was. In his hand, the dragon summoning flute that had changed into a sword form was also resonating loudly. It was completely illogical. After more than 60% of its components had been destroyed, it once again entered into an overload state. After 15 minutes of Nether River Drive, which broke the previous record, more than 400 deep warps and Judgment Holy Judgment, people wondered why this armor hadn't been destroyed yet. Why could it still continue to move? Why was it still so terrifying? Everyone was racking their brains to think. How long could it last? How long could it safely operate under such an overload state? Every answer was disdainfully trampled on by Anubis's feet. The only thing he could feel was fear and helplessness, and despair. Orton! 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 Among the stars, Beelzebub roared excitedly. You're all trash. Do you know that? You're all trash. None of you can fight. None. Amidst the ecstasy that made even his soul cry, the Lord of the Flies shouted excitedly, using all his strength to encourage Orton. He praised the mighty giant in the Blood Sea and patiently explained every tactical maneuver, every emergency dodge, and every amazing counterattack to Why Sure. In the midst of the battle, Anubis suddenly stopped. It looked back at the night sky behind it. It reached out its hand to invite the stars. It waited. Do you want to come, Beelzebub? The young man in the driver's seat laughed loudly and shouted, You can't understand the essence of driving just by explaining. I have new tricks to show you. The Lord of the Flies trembled. The Book of Steel was already tearing up. In the starry sky, the infusion of the infinite source substance finally ended. Under the unprecedented supply of source substance, Beelzebub's body turned red. Endless data flashed on the steel cover, faintly showing the glow of burning hell. All the preparations were in place. Your battle is calling for you, Beelzebub. It's time for you to appear. Why Sure reached out his hand and smiled. Go, my friend. Under the continuation of the starlight that filled the sky, between his opened arms, that thick iron book appeared with an excited radiance. Amidst the excited shouts, the blissful calls, and the fanatical roars, Lord of the Flies descended from the sky. After a long, long time of waiting, from hell to the reality, from the astral to now. With burning hot tears. Then, he dashed towards his best friend. Like a shooting star, it pierced through the storm and descended from the sky. You're late, Beelzebub. Anubis reached out and caught the dazzling light. As if he was laughing, he asked, How is it? Are you doing well? Orton, you bastard! Beelzebub scolded angrily. Do you know how it feels to wait for 70 years without an internet connection? Do you think I'm doing well? Ha ha ha, it seems like you're doing well. Orton smiled and patted his cover. Oh, it's gotten a lot thicker too. Oh, it looks like spirits can get fat from eating too much? You're amazing, although you're still a bit weaker than me. Can you stop being so smug? Beelzebub snorted coldly. He wanted to scold him, but he could not say anything. He had saved up so much anger and curses for him, but when they really met, he could not help but choke. I miss you so much, I know. Orton nodded and answered matter-of-factly, Because I miss you so much. I'm sorry for leaving you alone for so long and making you work so hard for so many years. But to be able to see you now, to see you make new friends, it's really great. The deceased ascender smiled and extended his hand, inviting him again. Beelzebub, can you fight with me again? Of course. Lord of the Flies laughed and replied, Other than me, who else can stand being your adjutant? But you, with your current body, can you stand my 6-dimensional jump? Of course, it's more than enough. Orton smiled and opened the inner structure of Anubis, carefully filling it in. Then let's do it again. That. Beelzebub was excited. Yes, that. Orton nodded. It's a resurrection battle, after all. Something cool. No problem. Lord of the Flies' voice was sonorous. It's just background music. Leave it to me. Listen, I made this for you personally. It's an original soundtrack. He responded to his best friend's request and call. At that moment, in the mountains of corpses and seas of blood on the ground, brilliant flames appeared again, spurting out from every crack in Anubis. The stigmata that had been dormant for many years was awakened by Beelzebub's will. It spread throughout this body that shared the same origin and path, instantly covering the entire armor. It controlled everything again. It rose from the ground and descended from the sky. The river Styx surged. The burning wings of light extended endlessly, towards the stars and hell, as if it wanted to wrap everything under the control of the Supreme One again. Wherever it passed, the melody from the abyss echoed in everyone's ears. It attacked without caring about anything and did not hide its location at all. It was as if it wanted to dissolve itself in the fire. Beelzebub sang excitedly. Give praise to the returning hero. A huge light wheel rose from the giant's back. The crack that led to the deepest part of the underworld opened again. Endless disasters attached to Anubis' body like iron, adding a crown of destruction to it. Layers of light revolved and draped over his body like a holy white robe. Above the overloaded engine, the blessings from the gods appeared again. What was even louder was the surging melody that burst out from the friction of countless iron pieces, echoing between heaven and earth. Thus, announcing the arrival of the Judge to the world. Thus, announcing the arrival of destruction to all of you, turning heaven and earth into his stage, making everything listen to his words. Under the majestic light wheel, the reborn God opened his arms, embracing the world that was filled with the flames of war and smoke. This was the judgment bestowed by the abyss, the destruction meticulously created by hell. This was Osiris, the giant of the underworld. Chapter 1158. Thank you, untouchable Alliance Master. It was supposed to be the majestic scene of a judge descending. But at this moment, it was like a heavy metal singer's concert. Dazzling light shone into the sky from Beelzebub's bad taste. Amidst the hissing roars and the melody of steel, the Styx split and opened from the center. In the surging Styx, the giant armored god slowly rose. Let all living things watch, let heaven and earth witness the arrival of the judgment. The world was cold and everything was silent. Only the clanging sound of steel became the main axis at this moment. Countless programs flowed out of Lord of the Flies, controlling the source substance, activating the laws, and surging angrily from the furnace. Osiris's miracle operated on Anubis' body, increasing the power of the armor endlessly. It returned to its original solemn appearance. In a few short moments, with Anubis as a container and the supply of source substance throughout the realm, Osiris, who had been sealed for 70 years, was reborn here. The blade of Horus unfolded and slashed at the blood snake in front. The earth and the sky cracked under the swing of the blade. Even the nearby stars swayed in the face of this terrifying destructive power. The giant snake hissed. But it was too late. The moment Osiris looked up, the surging river of blood and the giant snake in the river froze in the air. Between heaven and earth, there was only a line of moving red. It stretched forward in a straight line. Everywhere it passed, the river of blood evaporated, and the giant snake was cut in the middle. Then, the giant's skull was trampled into meat paste. The ruler's mournful cry dissipated in the wind. Only endless blood fell from the sky, turning into sticky rain. Under the slash of the blade of Horus, the heavily injured ruler did not even have a chance to struggle. In the blink of an eye, he made a prompt decision to explode this body, and once again resurrected from the altar of the fallen nation. But in front of Lamia's chest, the wound that went deep into her bones still could not be closed. An ear-piercing roar spread. Endless hatred rose from the domain of hell. Countless demons and monsters looked over, their murderous intent ferocious. But in response, there was only happy laughter. "Ha ha, how do you feel, Beelzebub?" Orton asked. "Did you hear the applause? It's been a long time since such a passionate performance." No way, right? Don't tell me you think you're awesome after warming up?" Lord of the Flies sneered. You only got a few points and you're already like this? Can you do it, Orton? Is he going to retire? Even so, the origin substance flowing within the engine was still as powerful as ever. He conveyed his excitement to the pilot's heart. This caused the laughter to become even more joyful. Then, let's have two more. Stepping on the boiling rain of blood beneath his feet, Osiris moved forward, dragging the massive sword of Horus with him as he charged into the endless shadows of hell once again. At this moment, looking down from above the starry sky, the darkness on the earth was also opened up in front of the blazing light. Countless hells were precipitated and burned in the flames. Under the hell giant's stomps, the surging river of death swallowed everything. They swept through the area. Wherever it passed, everything was cleanly destroyed. Under the suppression of Quafu and the 24 solar terms, Munfrost's expression suddenly changed. She retreated in the fierce wind, but the scorching red blade had already left a scar and wound on her face in an instant. The blessings and secret ritual that were bestowed by the eternal storm and the cold wave were also broken by the blade. The ruler's expression was gloomy. Without caring about anything else, the storm totem above his head suddenly descended. Then, countless blood-stained surfaces quickly cracked, revealing the solid ice that was sealed within. Under the thick layer of ice, a dazzling ray of lightning solidified within, exuding endless ferocity. That was the breath bestowed by the Grand Lord. The sea of lightning that gathered the remains of countless hells was the throne beneath the Grand Lord's feet. And this was the death embers that were exhaled by the Grand Lord's true body. The wind of origin that came from the deepest part of the sea of lightning, refined and sublimated from the destruction that had been brewing for countless eras. Now, the moment the ice layer broke, a bone-piercing chill flowed out from it, enveloping the world within a radius of millions of miles, freezing everything in a bleak white. Quafu flew out in a sorry state. Layers of ice crystals appeared on his originally strong and tough body. His flesh was dark and necrotic, and it was difficult to heal. But what was even more terrifying was the strand of amorphous thunder that flowed out from it. As the thunder faded, a hurricane suddenly appeared. The moment the vessel was destroyed, the breath of the Grand Lord descended upon this broken world. The stars swayed and froze, and on the ground, the realm of discovery was greeted with a violent tremor. The suppression of the 24 solar terms was easily torn apart by the breath of the King of Hell. The strongest power in the world descended upon this place, spreading and destroying indiscriminately. Everything was shattered like dust, and even the dust was reduced to nothingness in the dark storm. In a flash, countless buildings disappeared without a trace in the spreading torrent. Even Osiris, who was moving forward, fell into a standstill. The thick layer of ice that covered his armor grew rapidly, and then instantly cracked and peeled off. Amidst the spreading flames, a crack was actually opened up in the boundless storm. But soon, the spreading storm quickly contracted, and before it dissipated, it gathered again. In the hands of the frost moon, it eroded the ruler's body and completely enveloped her. In a short moment, the ruler was turned into ashes. But in the storm, a huge skeleton emerged with the color of steel, and it was difficult to erase. In this way, she also turned herself into a sacrifice and integrated into the infinite wind of origin. Faint moonlight leaked out from it, and the blurry face of the frost moon appeared again, roaring silently. In this way, she endured the correction from the fragment of the realm of discovery and forcibly broke through the shackles of the chessboard, revealing the true form of her soul in this fragment, the face that truly belonged to the ruler. Ignoring the tearing pain that penetrated deep into her soul, very good, very good. A ferocious smile appeared on the face of the frost moon, and she spat out thunder. I didn't expect to be able to make up for the regret of the past today. I'll use your head as a gift to the Grand Lord. You lunatics of the Thunder Sea, do you have nothing in your mind other than fighting? In the torn ice, the burning Osiris soared into the air. Orton sighed helplessly. but on the majestic steel face, there was indescribable joy and excitement. He said, "Fortunately, I'm the same." Behind him, the unfolded wings of light hung high in the night sky, spewing out thousands of flames, illuminating the dark world once again. Laughing, he looked disdainfully at the ruler in front of him, and the endless monsters and legions behind her, and hooked his finger. "All of you, come at me together." At the same time, in the distance, in the palace of the fallen kingdom, the mighty bell rang again under the will of the ruler. In the roar, endless blood rose into the sky like a giant pillar, spreading a dazzling red. The wounded blood snake coiled around the giant crystal-like pillar, the wounds on its body rapidly spreading and spreading, as if it was shedding a worthless robe. Flesh and blood rolled, and white bones were exposed. And what was even more dazzling was that on the huge snake's bones, there were lines of words that had long been engraved in the bone marrow. The curse and gift from the deepest part of hell. It could not be conveyed with lips and teeth, nor could it be carried by paper, cloth, or even iron and stone. Only the ruler's body could contain this supreme truth and majesty. This was the decree of the withered king. I hereby declare to all of you that there is an end to your rebellious existence. The Supreme King watches with downcast eyes. Those who wish to be lucky may struggle, offering their bones and blood as a farce. Those who are unwilling to surrender may flee, using hesitation and despair in exchange for the final reward. Wherever the world's myriad phenomena return, there will be a fallen kingdom. The cold words rose from Lamia's throat, extracting the life of the giant snake, and engraving an inviolable truth in this narrow world. The will of the withered king descended. The blood river flowed freely, and countless skeletons crawled out from the river, their eyes lit up, and withered origin substance surged, offering praise to death. Under the suppression of the world giant, the giant statue formed by countless skeletons roared at the sky, spewing out endless scarlet light. And the depth of the entire fragment began to increase at a terrifying speed. The stars in the sky swayed, and countless frames creaked under the pressure, even cracks appeared in the night sky. Under the impact of the decree of the withered king, the 6 paths of reincarnation were the first to collapse, and the celestials of the 3 paths of goodness were rapidly undergoing changes and withering under the pull of the gravity of hell. The mocking laughter of the courtiers rang out. The curse and the precipitation of hell that had seeped into the fragment at some point in time spewed out, and all the large groups gradually solidified amidst 5 different types of decay. Ever since the 3 branches of creation, destruction, and maintenance split, the shattered origin codex had no hope of mending. From then on, the solidified shadow constantly chased after the Indian ascendant. Now they were just one step behind, and the tragic situation of the past reappeared. And what was even more horrifying was that, after the 6 paths of reincarnation were lost, the night sky was still tilting. When the fulcrum of the stars was destroyed, the countless specks of starlight began to scatter. In the shattered reincarnation, the figure of stone incantation appeared for a moment. The celestial who had already died suddenly opened his eyes, and tears of blood flowed from his eyes. The withered body was like a stone, stuck between the collapsing 6 paths of reincarnation, and turned into the last pillar, propping up the collapsed foundation, and stabilizing the tilted stars once again. And as a price, the remaining 3 paths of good and 3 paths of evil were no more. Countless Indian ascendants turned into dust under the impact of the turbulence, and their souls, infected by the solidification, returned to the Continuation Academy in a sorry state. The double impact of the Sea of Thunder and the destruction of the country pushed the great secret apparatus into a precarious situation in the blink of an eye. Even though immortal stone incantation gave up the last bit of hope of rebirth and propped up the fulcrum once again, he could no longer withstand any impact. For a moment, the pressure on the other pillars began to increase explosively. The endless heat emitted by the solar almanac was gradually shrinking to maintain its stability. and after the breath of origin tore apart the 24 solar terms, cracks appeared on the sun wheel above the Fusang tree crown. The Lotus Emperor sat at the top of Fusang expressionlessly. He coldly looked down at the endless black tide. Let's see if you little rascals can shake the towering pillars formed after countless storms. Just behind Fusang, under the endless starry sky, the shadow of the abyss suddenly appeared. Bennett clasped his hands together. Apsu's darkness spewed out from the ground. After seizing the opportunity, it instantly locked Mars and the monsters of paradise in the hell that it had created. Countless people's expressions changed abruptly. At this moment, in the short period of time when the ascension was about to be completed, under the siege of countless hells, a temporary defensive vacuum appeared in the hinterland of the present realm. The winged serpent wheel and the angel of death had already passed through the layers of blockades and charged straight in. Woodman's face was already close. The spear of original sin, which looked like it was made of salt crystals, whistled through the air. In an instant it pierced Huaishi's body. The dust had settled. A child's dare ends here, Huaishi, Woodman said coldly. It's time to go home. Is that so? On the throne, Huaishi looked up slightly. Immediately after, an unsettling expression of joy appeared on that face. A pair of hands gently and persistently pressed on Woodman's hands that were holding the spear. Clench. No hurry. Just like that, he smiled at the visitor who had come from afar. Huaishi said, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chapter 1159. Woodman was stunned for a moment. It was as if in an instant everything was different. It wasn't that he had crossed countless obstacles, descended from the sky, and nailed this little bastard to his damned chair. Instead, he had driven his car, sang, and arrived at the restaurant. Someone opened the door for him, and warmly served him coffee and honey tea. A warm smile. Tell him, welcome home, F***ck. The moment a strange premonition appeared in his mind, he saw Huaishi's body suddenly dissolve as the tip of the spear pierced through him. It shattered into countless streams of light. Rise. Fly toward the stars that were close at hand, causing the swaying stars to return to stability. Countless starlight sprinkled down like mist, covering the mortal world. Immediately afterward, an infinite pressure pressed down from the night sky, and the entire reality fell silent for a moment. Only the crisp sound of countless frames expanding and colliding with each other could be heard in the wind. The sky full of brilliance illuminated the infinite darkness, and the crack in the night sky closed again. The turbulent mortal world returned to stability. Under the shroud of the great secret apparatus, everything was orderly. Wherever it passed, whether it was the last fulcrum supported by the incantation stone, the solar ephemeris, Fusang, and the Pantheon, they were once again connected as one. Everything was reorganized. Everything on the verge of collapse was quickly restored. The reality domain was completely unfolded, and the Gaia fragment had completely become an extension of the reality. And under the lock of countless frames, Woodman had been completely frozen in the void. It was difficult to move. The bone-piercing chill had already seeped into Woodman's soul before that. Ascension had actually been completed long ago. No, this was not a disguise, but a sacrifice through his own hands. After breaking free from the shackles of the program, he had completed a self-sacrifice. Right in front of him, under the tip of the spear, Huaishi's body quickly collapsed in the burning, and endless divinity and compassion flowed out from it. Thank you, Woodman. Huaishi smiled and sincerely expressed his gratitude to the person in front of him. In the midst of laughter, Huaishi opened his arms and embraced the death that was close at hand. He allowed Woodman's fatal blow to completely annihilate him. With his own life, he crossed the final distance. He had completed the final ascension. At this moment, following Huaishi's death, the throne among the stars silently collapsed. However, the destruction of the vessel didn't cause a chain reaction. Instead, it caused the great secret apparatus to begin to operate faster, because what flowed out of Huaishi's ruptured body wasn't just origin substance and divine light. There were also solemn and ancient silhouettes. The condensation of all meanings in the world, the final destination of all records, the reproduction of all originals and realities, it was the Genesis Codex passed down by celestial genealogy. A relic of authority that belonged to the orthodox lineage, the Book of Destiny. At that moment, the reality, hell, and even the governing game outside the chessboard were all dead silent. Mather's expression suddenly changed. Even the withered king, who was watching from the depths of the palace, raised his eyes slightly and exchanged glances with the Grand Monarch. In the decision-making room, many people's hands trembled and the hot coffee fell onto their pants. They didn't even hold the cup properly. Ignoring the wine in their necks, they turned around abruptly. His eyes widened. He looked at the old man who was smoking calmly. Unbelievable. It was impossible to see the schemes and determination hidden in that mysterious smile, but at that moment, everyone couldn't help but have the urge to suck in a breath of cold air. This old bastard, he, for this gamble, he actually took out the celestial genealogy's trump card. Not only did he give Huaishi the authority, but he even gave the original Book of Destiny to him. Long before the bet began, he had quietly placed all his bets on the scale. The moment the dice cup was opened, the thunder that hadn't dissipated in the past could be heard. It was so thrilling. Now, before the collapse spread, a brand new pillar appeared between heaven and earth. After Huaishi's shattered body, the Book of Solemnity's silhouette gradually rose, causing the stars in the sky to burst forth with light, as if welcoming the true axis. Just like that, it rose into the sky. Here, I offer everything I have to all things. Huaishi spread out his arms, embracing the stars in front of him, smiling as he welcomed death. With my soul as a sacrifice, I bestow upon the stars in the sky and all things in the world. This was the king of Donwa's final sacrifice. Just like that, Huaishi's soul and origin substance transformed into countless streaks of light, flying towards the lonely stars in the night sky. With my own body, I bestow a soul upon this enormous secret instrument. Mend all cracks, repair the turbulent mortal world, and return everything to peace. The countless frames and laws that had been scattered all over the place swiftly returned to the control of the starry sky. As the countless pages of the Book of Destiny flipped rapidly, Huaishi's will flowed out and spread out, instantly enveloping the entire world. Isolating hell, suppressing solidification, dispelling the disasters in the wind, cutting off the flow of the blood river and wild winds, returning everything to the right track. Heaven and earth became clear, looking brand new. Those distant sounds rose and fell, overlapping in one place, transforming into waves that spread out, once again enveloping the entire world. All things sang in joy. The sound of cracking could be heard. Within the frozen framework, the winged serpent wheel once again began to operate with great difficulty. Woodman roared. His eyes were scarlet red. Once again, after being toyed with by the Book of Destiny for who knows how many times, the solidified being had already sunk into madness, recklessly activating the divine mark that had transformed into a serpent wheel behind him. Specks of blood appeared on the spear in his hand. Vast amounts of disasters and pain surged out from the strange blade. Under the shattered salt crystals, the outline and appearance of steel appeared, reenacting the death of God, killing everything in the mortal world. Mark of the miracle, Longinus. Go F*** King die for me. Woodman roared, raising his spear, aiming at the Book of Destiny that had yet to disappear among the stars in the sky, suddenly stabbing. He no longer cared about Mather's shouts and shouts. He wanted to completely smash everything in front of him into smithereens. But before that, an even more dazzling flame burst forth from the stars. As Huaishi's figure was completely incinerated, a brand new outline converged from the stars. In a short flick of a finger, it was reforged under the irrigation of the great secret ritual. Amidst the countless brilliant starlight, a pair of cold eyes looked down. Iron light grew from his hand, and in the blink of an eye, it descended from the sky again. It crossed the distance between the earth and the sky, tearing apart the space formed by the violent wind. The mighty sound of the seven seas' rushing waves reappeared. The blade that gathered infinite mass ignited with pure light and fell like a meteor. It sped past the tip of the spear and pierced into Woodman's head. But there was a soft sound. The blade tore through the insignificant skull and came out from the back of his head. It pulled him down and fell to the ground. Amidst the winged serpent's sorrowful cry, he crashed to the ground. Soon after, the figure in the sky slowly descended. Trample! The ground cracked. Woodman's body was completely trampled into the crack. His face was pressed deep into the soil by the pressure of his leather boot. Only the eyes that struggled to raise in the roar saw that face from the bottom up again. It was so familiar. Huaishur bent down and looked at his sorry appearance. He smiled. "Long time no see." He asked, "Are you all right?" He did not wait for a response. Whether he was all right or not, he would definitely not be all right next. Because of the glow of pain, Huaishur's hand appeared. Then, like a bullet, wrath was loaded. The wolf-head hammer suddenly opened its eyes, and the tail spewed out crimson flames. Like a falling meteorite, it smashed toward the head under its feet. In the roar, Woodman flew backward. But before he landed, Huaishur's figure had already appeared in the air. The spear of compassion in his hand reappeared, overlapping with wrath. The ferocious halberd slashed down and slashed across his throat. A head flew into the air, and then it was violently smashed by the hammer. Then, the chain blade flew out and wedged into the chest of the wreckage. Then, the wreckage that flew out flew backward under the pull of the chain. In the same place, Huaishur raised his hands calmly and had already put on an impeccable batting posture. In his hand, the mighty tide reverberated again. A Fang of the seven seas. Wave. Boom. Just like that, the wreckage was completely smashed into a pile of meat paste. In this short moment, the eyeballs of countless observers were about to say goodbye to the eye sockets that had accompanied them for many years, and their eyeballs popped out in surprise. The moment Huaishur completed his sacrifice, another Huaishur reappeared at an incredible speed. Then, he used Woodman to put on a show of killing. Under the attack of various weapons, Woodman did not even have time to fight back before he turned into a pile of slag. He directly fought a Tier 5? And a Tier 5 from the Utopia era? Where did such a fierce beast come from? Before this, the observers who had just gotten used to Huaishur's various tricks finally remembered how ridiculous this bastard was when he was at his peak. Not only did he advance in front of the rotten dragon, but he also blew up the Najilfa fleet. In the end, he even placed the wreckage under the iron monument of the Utopia, leaving an inexorable shadow in the hearts of countless hell hordes. This was not the Calamity Sword, at all, but the most ridiculous output card of the current celestial genealogy, the Returner, which had just been released not long ago. He took down the representative role of the Golden Card at Tier 4 and single-handedly created the mainstay of the Utopia. Returner Huaishur. The moment he sacrificed himself and integrated the Book of Destiny into the Great Arcana, Huaishur decisively abandoned the power to control the world and handed it over to the scholars of the Continuation Academy gathered in the Ivory Tower. In any case, the Book of Destiny had his simulated personality, and the administrator account was still in his hands. It did not matter how he used it at critical moments. But now, the most important thing was no longer the Great Arcana. It was the King Golden Dawn. Now, the two of us can have a good chat. Huaishur carried off Fang and coldly glanced at Woodman, who was quickly regenerating under the winged serpent wheel, and sneered, "Don't you like to chat? Why don't we talk about how you reached Tier 5 with such a noob like you?" Boom. A loud sound burst forth again. Woodman's expression changed abruptly, and he retreated again in disbelief. Longinus in his hand shook violently, almost flying out of his hand. He was actually almost unable to hold his weapon under the attack of Huai Shi's Cloud Lord. But before he had any time to react, Huai Shi's face reappeared in front of him. He sneered. The sword that cut down the 7 seas. Infinite power came from the vibrating sword, causing the tip of the spear to buzz. It was even transmitted to his bones and flesh, causing the new gray wing on his back to suddenly burst and fall apart. If that strange vibration burst out in his body, it would be enough to blow him into minced meat in an instant. But at that moment, what entered his ears was a vast and distant chime, a tide of endless melody. It was as if what he was facing was not a scholar's poem. But, at that moment, Woodman suddenly raised his head and looked at the countless brilliant stars above his head. That was where the great movement came from. "Oh, you actually heard it?" Huai Shi sneered and raised the blade in his hand again. "This is the performance of the entire world." At that moment, a mighty sound that echoed the stars burst out from his body. The power of the entire realm was poured into this narrow body, and it exploded with a bang. This was the ability to turn the entire world into a concert hall mastery. Symphony. Chapter 1160. He had never experienced such an amazing feeling before. It was as if he had become one with the world. The rotation of the sun, moon, and stars was like a rushing bloodline. The breath in his heart was like a storm, and the whispers from the clouds were like thunder. When his heart beat, the distant and mighty sound of waves could be heard. The resonance from the great secret instrument continuously lowered this power, delicately maintaining it at an upper limit that Huai Shi had never imagined, increasing its destructive power infinitely. Now, the performance of heaven and earth was entrusted to his own strings. The sound of the world was gathered between his 5 fingers. Suddenly it exploded. Huai Shi's figure disappeared without any warning. Only the dazzling metal light cut through the void, leaving behind a burning trail like a meteor. It went straight forward. It went straight in front of the winged serpent wheel. It exploded. Woodman's figure flickered and appeared in midair. His expression was gloomy, and Longinus in his hand was buzzing. When faced with this attack, he realized that he definitely could not block it head-on. Otherwise, even his soul might be injured. "How does it feel to be in a different era, Mr. Woodman?" Huai Shi raised his head from the depression in the ground and asked curiously, "Do you feel very disappointed?" In his hand, the blade had been ravaged by that terrifying power and had already fallen apart. The cracks spread up his arm and climbed up his neck and face. But very quickly, under Huai Shi's casual movements, the surging metal light in the countless cracks quickly healed, retracted, and disappeared. The injured parts were instantly transformed into origin substance and then reconstructed, causing the muscles and bones that had been torn apart by the recoil to completely heal, looking brand new. After reaching the 4th level, this feeling of being reborn at the drop of a hat was really good. He completely threw the huge consumption to the back of his mind. Under the constant attention of the great secret instrument's endless origin substance, Great Si Ming and Yun Zhongjuan's divinity constantly changed, causing Woodman to feel waves of disgust. It came from the restraint of the celestial genealogy. F*CK the Heavens Inquisition Road. God knows which bastard had slapped his head and saw that there was still a lot of empty space to use after completing the design of the Imperial Court and the ruins of End. Guess what? I think it's too boring to just design a support. In the current version, they can use it to kill their own people surprise. Their high resistance to negative origin substances and curses allowed these bastards to be immune to most of the debuffs in celestial genealogy. At the same time, they were able to turn the enemy's curses into food and further convert them into their own strength. Coupled with all kinds of weapons, relics, and even miraculous engravings, almost every ascendant of the Heaven's Inquisition road had endless tricks up their sleeves. Once the harsh environmental requirements were met and the supply of origin substances was taken care of, these guys would suddenly transform from support to DPS so powerful that it made one's scalp go numb. No way, I can't be so passive anymore. The injured winged serpent hissed, and the giant wheel spun. In the sky, the huge gray wings spread out again and swallowed the sharp blade thrown by Huai. Then, Woodman held Longinus upside down and aimed it at the ground. His 5 fingers loosened. Thus, the pitch-black spear in his hand followed the call of gravity and fell into the embrace of the earth. In that instant, Huai's throat tightened. He felt a chill run down his spine, and the alarm of death exploded. Without thinking, he sprinted away and instantly retreated. But in the sky above his head, even under the suppression of the great secret instrument, the god-slaying spear was still rapidly falling towards him, burning with flames. It quickly split apart. It expanded several times, and in the blink of an eye, the sky was already covered with burning edges. As Huai retreated, she changed her angle without any warning. Under the acceleration of gravity, she became faster and faster. In fact, she even broke through the limits of what the naked eye could see. She pulled out a pitch-black line, extending and elongating. Now, countless black edges had locked onto Huai and sealed him within. Even the afterimages created by Shadow Burial's shuttling were all torn apart. Sparks constantly burst out in the air, and the sounds of swords and spears colliding rang out incessantly. Huai's space to dodge was rapidly shrinking. But even so, Woodman still felt that it was not enough. He raised his other hand and aimed it at the night sky. In the blink of an eye, dozens of dazzling flames appeared out of thin air in the dark night. Meteorites inscribed with countless runes fell from the sky. The earth shook violently, and in the midst of the air waves, a bolt of lightning suddenly shot up into the sky. It came from Huai's fingertip. The heavenly drum was stirred. In just a few seconds, the 9th-degree purified lightning played a destructive lingering sound in the sky, echoing with the lightning that struck down from another part of the night sky. Countless god-slaying spears that were pouncing towards the earth strangely froze in place at that moment. Then, the lightning that was charging towards Woodman suddenly reversed and turned back. He actually made a prompt decision to transform his own source substance into lightning again. Huai pounced towards Woodman. Along with the countless Longinus behind him, little bastard, you motherf asterisk cur, Woodman cursed. The veins in his eyes were like fire. The gray wings unfolded, and the layers of dim mist collapsed from the outline of the wings, suddenly turning into the appearance of a ferocious dragon with a crown on its head. It opened its huge mouth, and a terrifying chill gushed out from it. Frost spread and froze everything. Even the source substance transformed lightning could not escape stagnation, and it quickly slowed down in the air. But behind the cracked ice, a faint laugh came. Thunder and lightning in the twilight, what is there to worry about? Accompanied by a low chant, the jade crown appeared on Huai's head, divine mark imprint, Heaven's Inquisition, activated. The power contained in the body was completely transformed into lightning, and it intensified in the projection of the heavenly palace, erupting in all directions without any difference. Another sun seemed to appear in the night sky. It was countless overlapping lightning bolts, and countless branches spread out from the ferocious main trunk, but they were entangled in one place, overlapping with each other, forming a giant wheel covered in burrs. Dazzling flames spread, and as the giant wheel rotated and crushed, the giant beast formed by the gray mist evaporated. Woodman suddenly stretched out his hand and clenched his 5 fingers. Indifference. Do you think you can escape from Longinus like this? Dream on. In that instant, countless Longinus converged, forming a strange blade thousands of meters long. As it rotated, it tore through the blazing light and pierced through it. The lightning wheel collapsed instantly, and it was torn into 2 without any resistance. And the tip of the spear had already sunk deep into it. but it was gone and it stretched out from the other end. Only Huai Shi's face emerged from the blazing light, mocking him. Familiar screams and hisses seemed to come from the wind, causing Woodman's expression to darken. Alistair? This is, under the dissipating flames, a solemn door of darkness slowly opened behind Huai Shi, swallowing the destruction brought by Longinus. The ultimate. Under Huai Shi's misdirection, Samuel's full-strength attack pierced into the ultimate, and then the destruction contained in it spread without reservation. In the blink of an eye, the ultimate showed signs of collapsing. It was actually difficult to seal the spear of calamity condensed from death. Huai Shi could clearly feel that even the flesh and blood of the eternal beast was rapidly withering and withering under this stab. But what was even louder was the dying wail from within. Under the double ravages of the ultimate suppression and the eternal beast's flesh and blood erosion, the world finally ushered in its final end. The moment the door to the ultimate opened, he almost thought that he had finally found an opportunity. But he never dreamed that what he waited for was not the rescue of his teammate. Instead, it was an unreserved attack from Woodman. Wow, you're so ruthless even to your own people. As expected of the Golden Dawn. Really amazing. Amazing. Huai Shi could not help but clap his hands in admiration, not hiding his mocking laughter at all. Behind him, the door to the ultimate opened again, revealing the god-slaying spear that was constantly circling in the darkness, unable to find its target. It was aimed at Woodman, who was right in front of it. I'll give it back to you. Without waiting for Woodman to react, Longinus, who was still attached to threads of flesh and blood erosion, had already shot out towards its master. When the calamity gathered by the massive amount of death was neutralized by the vitality of the eternal beast's flesh and blood, the pitch-black spear seemed to have rusted, covered in bronze-green spots and mildew. Even the curse and vicious poison that made Woodman's expression change. The winged serpent wheel spun wildly, the giant snake opened its mouth and bit down on the spear thrown by Huai Shi. Countless scales quickly shattered and peeled off from its body. The snake's head welcomed the rapid decay, the white bones were exposed, and venom was constantly seeping out, sizzling. But before he could react again, Huai Shi's pupils once again appeared in front of him. The sword of seven seas slashed down, tearing through the gray fog and slashing on the defensive framework that appeared in front of him. Cracks started to appear on the boundary of truth, everlasting prosperity. Under the impact of this pure force, outside the cracks, there were sounds of shock and astonishment. It can't be, it can't be? How could the great Woodman, a level 5 and creator double ascender, be so weak? Huai Shi asked curiously, pausing between each word. Big brother, why were you beaten by a level 4 to the point where you can't even raise your head? Bang! The angel of death's furious roar turned into a light of darkness, spurting out from Woodman's mouth, causing Huai Shi to have no choice but to retreat a distance and temporarily avoid the sharp edge. But his mocking smile became more and more indulgent. Angry? Just kidding, you don't have to go so far, right? Or are you saying that you mess with other people's mentality every day and in the end, you're the kind that's especially easy to break through? Huai Shi wiped the ashes on his sword indifferently and asked casually, "Oh right, how did Russell kill you back then? It doesn't look very thorough, but there's still so much dust left." Or... He paused, his smile becoming more and more mocking. "Don't tell me you think that you still have a chance to obtain the Book of Destiny after becoming like this? That's great, that's really great. Is this what they mean by men are all youths until death? It's so cute and naive that I'm about to cry. Whoa, Woodman, my Woodman." That gentle and warm tone, as well as that malicious and cruel smile, was simply better than all the slashes and wounds of swords. Not only was the scarlet-eyed Woodman furious, but even the many chess players and all the spectators watching through the mirrors couldn't help but want to take 2 breaths of cold 1982 oxygen. Damn it, was this really the Prince of Paradise who was known for his gentleness and kindness? Was this the heavenly state cowherd who was known for his bright and beautiful sunshine? Don't joke around. Look at this scene. It was enough to be ranked in the top 10 wicked scenes of the century, and it was so wicked that even the king of fun from the fallen country couldn't help but applaud. How was this the white jade pillar holding up the sea and purple gold beam of the astronomy meeting? How was this still human? It could only be said that he was indeed worthy of being the student and successor taught by that old bastard, Russell. He was simply better than his predecessor. For a moment, no matter how callous the audience was, they couldn't help but feel compassion and pity for Woodman. What did Woodman do wrong to deserve such treatment? Oh, the traitor of the Golden Dawn. That's fine. Damn it, increase the power. Why, sure, in the dead silence, the killing intent that could freeze everything spread. Woodman's eyes burned and were covered in blood. The winged serpent hissed, breeding a dark tide of disaster. But before he could speak again, behind Huaishur, in the distant night sky, Yi Zichen looked at Huaishur. The roar of steel spread. Together with the main cannon that was more than 160 meters long, weighed 470 tons, and was personally forged by the Grand Master, Mikhail, to strike across depth the wailing harpoon. The green waves spread out like a tide. The whale hissed. The main cannon of the Kingdom of Heaven's battleship, Nautilus, fired. Shoo, don't talk. Huaishur smiled, raised a finger to her lips, and gently reminded Woodman, don't worry. Feel it with your heart. Chapter 1161. If one thought about it carefully, there seemed to be nothing more wonderful than the so-called heart in this world. It was as if anything would become fashionable when it was associated with the heart. The heart could create happiness, the heart could solve problems, and the heart could bring about fetters. The heart could also feel love, friendship, dreams, trust, hope, and all the other insignificant things. And this was a fury that would burn all of you and the entire hell into ashes. Now, the fury was entrusted to the steel. The iron whale hissed. Under the illumination of the stars, the clear and clear mortal world was instantly covered by a scarlet that stung all eyes. They surged out from the darkness and attached themselves to the steel, burning the silent wailing harpoon in its chest into a scarlet red. The steel unfurled its formless wings, absorbing the power transmitted from all of the outposts without the slightest hesitation. It brutally marched through the mortal world, carrying with it the scorching heat of destruction and the hatred left behind by countless souls. The distant and distant distance was left behind in the blink of an eye. Now, destruction descended from the sky along with the fury of the stars, causing all things to tremble and the earth to shake. Wherever the cold starlight shone, even the hurricane came to an abrupt stop. Before that, the infinite pressure had already suppressed the serpent-wing wheel of the Angel of Death, not allowing it to struggle at all. It also did not allow it to dodge or escape. Karma was at its head. Look, Mr. Woodman. Huaishur looked at the fiery red falling from the sky. Among the countless swaying shadows, his smile was no longer warm, only cold and cruel. The time for judgment has come. Now judgment had arrived. The serpent wing wheel hissed, and the giant wheel spun. Countless gray wings spread out, overlapping with each other and eroding reality. It was as if a skyscraper had risen from the ground. The boundary within the wings began to transform rapidly, towards hell, and endless barriers appeared out of nowhere. The unique and terrifying sealing ability of the eternal prosperity of truth's framework manifested itself. Even the suppression of the great secret ritual was blocked outside. All of the power was accurately and rapidly channeled to the critical point. Under the wings of the Angel of Death, countless bubbles of hell appeared, forming a small but concrete structure of the abyss. The infinite depth rapidly increased in front of the wailing harpoon. However, none of this would work. Under the bombardment of the cannons, the innumerable gray fog was dispersed. The drifting wings were burned to ashes in the raging fire. The endless depths were broken through and crossed layer by layer under the falling ferocious stars. Woodman's delaying and diverting won't work. Because some things would not disappear with the passage of time or the increase of distance. They would only become stronger and stronger in the loneliness of waiting and the torment of the abyss. The origin substance contained within it had evolved countless times, forming a crystallization of hatred that made even Huai Shi's hair stand on end. A short moment passed in a flash. There was only a soft slap. It was like the sound of an unrealistic fantasy and a fluke being shattered. Amidst the abyssal projection that exploded and collapsed, a painful shriek resounded throughout the entire fragment world. Wriggling silhouettes rose from the dissolving land. In the thick dark fog formed by the abyssal precipitation, the wounded monster was screaming. It could no longer suppress its essence. After breaking away from the category of human, it revealed the essence of the abyss after solidification. Or rather, that was Woodman's true appearance. Scales that seemed to be condensed from blood spread out under the brilliance of the stars. 7 ferocious heads spread out like fans, crowned with the essence of the abyss. 10 strange, sharp horns grew from the heads. When the ugly wings of flesh unfolded, they covered the brilliance of the stars, causing the world to fall into eternal darkness. It should have been like this, but now everything had become completely different under the burning of anger. The monster that filled the entire world was struggling in pain. Countless pieces of flesh and blood spilled from its shattered wings, dyeing the ground red. Charred cracks appeared on its neck, and 4 of its heads were nowhere to be seen. The horns on the remaining 3 heads were shattered. Its body had already collapsed under the ravaging of the high heat, and scorch marks covered its body. And this was just the surface. The real damage was the soul that had barely recovered under the rules of the gamble. Cracks gradually appeared under the impact of the wailing harpoon and Huai Shi's malicious corrosion. Countless crazy thoughts surged in the soul. The poisonous streams that were fighting for themselves could no longer be unified under Woodman's suppression. Instead, they were provoked by the pain inflicted by the outside world, and became more and more restless and violent. They were like insect eggs that were rapidly sprouting in the body, nibbling away at the structure of the soul. At the same time, it made the behemoth even more violent and violent. It did not care about anything, and it instinctively wanted to inflict disaster and destruction on all things. It wanted to devour the stars in front of it. Together with Huai Shi, is it about to lose control, Woodman? Marth murmured expressionlessly. The hands behind his back clenched tightly in anger. The rules of the gamble were ultimately limited. Even if they were reconstructed, they had lost the most important reason. For the creator, this was simply a fatal flaw. Moreover, Woodman's obsession with the Book of Destiny. He actually showed such a disgraceful side in front of his former enemies. It was simply like a child who was hysterical because he could not get candy to eat. How sad. I can still help, Arthur Machin said. There's still time. There's no need. Marth was silent for a moment and slowly shook his head. Arthur, do your job well. Just give him the all elixir. If you can't get it, destroying all of this is another option. Before that, let him indulge himself one last time. His expression gradually turned cold, and he whispered cruelly, I have to let those guys who are proud of their honor know that their utopia is not the only one who hates all of this. Thus, in the chessboard, in the depths of the Hell domain, a strange ray of light flew out and landed on the behemoth's remnant body. The healing miracle extracted from countless historical records ushered in a distorted soul after solidification, the all-elixir. In the blink of an eye, countless wounds healed without any medicine. The severed head regrew, and pairs of distorted flesh wings spread out from the behemoth's huge body. The reborn monster raised its eyes again. The madness and chaos in its 7 heads did not decrease but increased instead. Without any warning, it opened its mouth toward Huai Shi and spat out a hot current and frost wind that could melt everything. Poison and curses spread, and eternal desolation descended. Even the realm of reality's domain was torn apart by its breath. Eternal pollution and distortion were like seeds that were implanted in every inch of land it passed. Endless hell sank and spread, and even the depth began to skyrocket. Everything fell toward hell. And right in front of the breath of destruction, Huaishur looked down coldly at all of this. The light of the secret ritual descended, and the power of the entire reality realm's domain was strengthened in one person's hand. With the activation of the divinity of Great Si Ming and Yun Zhongjuan, countless lightning bolts descended from the sky with just a raise of their hands, forming a prison. They closed the door behind them tightly, sealing and isolating the inside and outside. They sealed hell, the monster, and themselves inside. And in the prison, only Huaishur and Woodman, man and beast, the reality realm and hell, and the utopia and golden dawn were left. "Come on, Woodman, come on." Huaishur raised his head and called out to his enemy, "It's time to settle the score between us. Together with the debt of the past, those children, those innocents, those bones buried under Donbua's soil, and more, farther, and more ancient hatred. Those who had passed away, those who died, those who should not have been in despair and went to hell, and those who should have had a bright future, everything. How are you going to repay it?" The giant beast roared crazily. A huge halo revived from the top of its head, shrouding the grayish-black crown like a snake, indiscriminately sprinkling jealousy and hatred. Countless eyes stared at Huaishur. The young man shrouded in the boundless radiance. Was it hatred or envy that appeared in those chaotic eyes? But in the end, it all turned into malice and mockery, as if they were looking at a fool who was trying to stop a chariot. The 7 heads opened, and countless chaotic words overlapped in one place. Some were murmuring, some were questioning, some were mocking, and some were roaring. In the end, it became a roar that ravaged everyone's eardrums. In the huge mouth, a mournful light spewed out. Like a sharp blade of destruction, it swung wildly, piercing and slashing toward Huaishur. A power that was enough to envelop the entire city in destruction and evaporate everything into dust descended, and the 10,000-foot palace rose from the ground under Huaishur's feet. There are 9 layers of redemption. Who can measure them? Looking at the towering heavenly palace, who created it? Miracle imprint, heaven's inquisition unfold. The projection of the heavenly palace descended, and the cruel scene of the twilight village reappeared. Steel walls descended from the void, overlapping each other. Under the illumination of the setting sun, the glorious era of the steel hell reappeared. And in the night sky behind the heavily shattered iron walls, the Nautilus cruised mightily. Huaishur's unique heavenly palace, the heavenly battleship built by the Utopia in the past, descended here. However, this time, it was no longer an empty shell of the past. Inside the bridge, the weapons cabin, the deck, and the engine room, every part and every corner lit up with the glow of miracles, under the control of the returnees. The spirits that had passed away had returned, and they had returned to their posts once more. They were moving towards their mission, not only here, but also in every sentry post throughout the reality realm, in all the positions in the ivory tower. The souls who returned from the dead woke up the silent devices with ease. They connected with each other, causing the operation of the great secret instrument to become more and more resounding and intense. There were more sublimators, who once again threw themselves into the battlefield. The souls of the great secret instrument were not created by Huaishur alone. Instead, they supported it again. That glorious era seemed to have returned once again. The beautiful past reappeared on this chessboard, once again supporting the pillars of the world and laying the foundation for all ages. Even if it was only for this fleeting moment, Nautilus is at your service, Your Excellency Huaishur. At this moment, on the silent bridge, the captain of the Leucoplakia ship bowed his head and offered his loyalty to the figure on the ground. Please give the order. Isn't our enemy here, everyone? Huaishur raised his hand and pointed forward. There is only one order: kill them all. There was no need to leave behind any wreckage or fragments, not even ashes or dust. Burn the betrayers to ashes. Now, please show me the wrath of Nautilus. Thus, inside the warship, in front of countless instruments, the faces illuminated by the dim light showed a cold smile in unison. Notify the entire ship, the captain's hoarse voice rang in everyone's ears. In the name of the Republic, destroy all rebels, he said. Fire all missiles. In that instant, the iron whale in the midst of the stars roared again. The armor covering its entire body rose, split open, and rapidly expanded. The complex structure compressed within the internal space unfolded layer by layer, revealing countless dark voids, as well as war weapons that had been dormant for a long time. Countless pitch-black cannons extended from under Nautilus's body. A torrent of source substance gushed out and spread, enveloping the pitch-black warship in a dazzling rainbow light that resembled a sun's wheel. It was so solemn. Entire region locked down. Central axis anchored. Over-limit supercharging drive. All departments operating normally. All personnel ready. Annihilation mode activated. Under Huaishi's will, the song of the whale reverberated through the metal. Hundreds of thousands of fiery lights rose into the night sky, illuminating it as bright as day. All living things trembled in the face of this torrent of destructive firepower. Everything was completely drowned out. Countless rays of intense light rose from the ground like the sun and then dissipated, leaving streaks of mournful scars on the retina. The war began at this moment, and the war ended at this moment. And the merciless revenge and devastation had just begun. Chapter 1162. Everything was swallowed up by the dazzling radiance. There was no trace of darkness. Only the flames surged and spread like a torrent, rapidly expanding in all directions. Countless sharp sounds came from outside, like glass shattering. The cage formed by the lightning began to change shape, bending and cracking. Then, tongues of fire spewed out from the cracks, burning the ground red and tearing a huge hole in the dark clouds in the sky. Even more light shot between heaven and earth, passing through the intense battlefield and wiping out any large group that tried to approach. Tens of thousands of miles away, Osiris waved his hand to disperse the remnant shockwaves. Amidst the encirclement and slaughter of the rulers, Osiris, who had been dyed scarlet, looked back. He was momentarily lost in thought. But soon, enveloped by the breath of origin, he was once again drawn into the eternal storm. In the rolling darkness, a cruel hell of frost and moon rose from the ground. In the blink of an eye, the world within the lightning prison seemed to have been destroyed 10,000 times. No more matter could remain. Everything evaporated under the excessive destruction. Febrile winds that could melt steel stirred back and forth in the air, but no more dust gathered. Only in the very center of the cage was that huge, withered body that was like a stone that remained intact. Countless cracks crisscrossed, and wisps of gray fog rose from within, spreading out as viscous as blood. Now, the 7 incomplete heads raised once more, coldly looking at the sky. The 10,000 times of destruction had not killed it. Instead, it had made it even more berserk and savage. From the land of raging fire and melting earth, it suddenly spread out its broken wings, causing endless flames to spread out as it flew towards its opponent in the sky. In the dispersing soul, endless poison streams spread. The original sin of man gathered in this body that had been deformed by the essence of the abyss. It burned like flames, causing the 7 heads to scream. The sharp sound pierced through the cage and spread in all directions. Wherever it passed, countless people's consciousness became dizzy, their souls instantly collapsing, or they were immersed in sudden illusions and desires, unable to extricate themselves. Gradually solidifying, chaos was spreading, along with hell. As long as it existed, it would endlessly spread this solidification and corruption. This was the essence of the poison stream. It was as if a terrifying corrosive force had descended from the abyss. With the help of the distortion brought about by the sinking of countless souls, the skeleton-like giant dragon rapidly recovered and opened its mouth towards the Nautilus in the sun. Darkness eruption. At this moment, darkness radiated out like radiance and converged. Countless essences of death surged within, transforming into a withering breath. Wherever it passed, the depth value skyrocketed, and everything was torn to pieces under the violent changes. The lightning prison that was in imminent danger was pierced through by the light of original sin. Collapsed. After breaking through the defense of the sun wheel, a tragic gap was left in the overheated red armor of the Nautilus. The sound of explosions rang out incessantly. The overheated engine unit whined in the turbulence and impact. But now, in the sky, the Nautilus did not retreat but advanced. The jet port at the tail once again glowed with a dazzling light. Everyone! A hoarse roar from the bridge rang throughout the entire warship. Everyone, stay in position. Level 4 impact standby. Engine number 2, number 4 and number 6 overload. The captain stared at the rapidly magnifying face on the screen amidst the countless snowflakes and noise. His expression was ferocious. His sharp canine teeth bared like a wild beast. Crash into it. There was no hesitation. Only the sizzling sound of steel burning hands could be heard. In the furnace-like engine room, the control valves were tightened again. Using human strength to change the heart of the furious beast, changing the engine unit, opening the pressure relief valve, adjusting the matrix structure, and charging towards the enemy without holding back. At the front of the battleship, the sharp horn was like a burning red blade, and it was already aimed at the charging Semel. The sound of steel screeching suppressed the roar of the beast. You want to crash? Fine, then crash. Now, the heavy steel slashed down like an axe towards the rising beast of original sin. Only the ear-piercing sound continued to spread, and sparks flew between the stars. Countless pieces of iron and scales fell from the sky. Viscous black blood and burning fuel gathered in one place, sprinkling on the earth like a rainstorm. Airwaves spread. The entire Nautilus let out a distorted sound in an instant. Everyone could hear the sound of the keel bending. However, the gigantic beast was once again reduced to dust by this unreserved attack. The wings with broken bones swayed weakly in the wind and drooped down. A huge crack had appeared in front of the neck and chest. Under the broken bones, no internal organs could be seen pulsating. Only endless darkness was operating. The moment it was revealed, reality within 100 miles began to distort. Rotten flesh grew out of the shattered rocks, and pairs of empty eyes appeared on the withered plants. Even on the front deck of the Nautilus, the places covered by the blood of darkness, there were traces of distortion. It was no longer a structure of life. Instead, it was like holding an entire abyss. A broken wing was not enough to make it back down. The giant dragon turned around and tore off the wing without hesitation, devouring it greedily with its 7 mouths. From the crack on its back, sharp bones pierced out, and blood and fascia spread out to cover it. A new wing of flesh was born. It flapped its wings again. It pounced towards its opponent. But in the wind, a contemptuous sneer sounded. It was an opponent from the night sky. Yun Zhongjuan raised a finger coldly. The mighty sound of a bell burst out from the Nautilus out of thin air. An invisible force quickly repaired all the wounds. In the Nemo engine, the sound of tides burst out. The black clouds above the sky opened like a curtain, covering the stars in all directions. Endless blazing light slashed down from the clouds. Torrential rain poured down. But what fell was not rain, but metal that dissolved into liquid. It was as if millions of tons of mercury were sprinkled from the clouds, smearing the entire world with a cold silver white. Lightning struck down, killing all the distorted matter and collecting it into the eternal darkness of the ultimate. Amidst the storm, sharp blades appeared from the clouds. thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, endless origin substance armed with the curse and malice imposed by the divine mark, heaven's inquisition fell towards the mortal world, flew down and stabbed out. The entire world was shrouded in the high-pitched sound of steel rubbing against each other. It was like thunder. Heavens fall! Heavens fall! Heavens fall! Heavens fall! Heavens fall! Endless will of the heavens brewed in the dark cloud furnace and exploded. All the swaying souls were shocked by this clanging sound. They looked up in disbelief at the magnificent miracle in the distance. No, such a ferocious miracle, it was not an exaggeration to call it a disaster, right? It was hard to imagine such a terrifying scale. It had long surpassed the destruction of the endless sea. Under the piercing of the endless sharp blades, only the roar of the beast of original sins spread. The sharp blades tore his body apart and wedged deep into his bones, releasing the anger, pain, resentment, compassion, and grief within. It made flowing venom angry, wail, and reappear with greed. In fact, he even ignored the sharp blades that were violently hurting him and opened his mouth, swallowing the steel in large mouthfuls. Black blood spurted out from the cracks, melting the material and gathering it into a lake. It pulled the steel into the abyss that was born in his body. It was as if he wanted to swallow the endless rain of steel. Even his own death was swallowed into his stomach. In the end, he did not even let his own Longinus go. Between the closed sharp teeth, the divine mark was shattered. Then, a loud sound that shook heaven and earth burst forth. Scales that were as sharp as blades grew out of his flesh and devoured the things that had killed him. The angel of death transformed once again. At the end of his giant tail, a sharp blade that resembled a spear extended out. The burning crown enveloped the seven-headed red dragon's head. The original sins of original sins of original sins and the monster born from the abyss had completed a complete fusion. Woodman, whose face had changed beyond recognition, hissed and spat out a scarlet breath filled with hatred at the enemy. But what responded to him was the mountain blades that extended out from the dark clouds in the sky. At the top of the Nautilus, Huaishur reached out and grabbed the invisible sword hilt. The clanging sound of countless iron crystals multiplying rang out continuously from the dark clouds. With the world as the furnace, the endless origin substance of darkness as the iron, and lightning as the decoration, and the name of countless sacrifices, finally, hatred and killing intent descended like a mountain. The heavenly imperial sword had reappeared in the world. The dark clouds that filled the sky were split open by the spread of the sharp blade. The spreading hurricane collapsed under the pressure of the mountain range. The earth wailed and deep valleys split open. It was as if the high and mighty heavens had sent down a judgment. The world was in turmoil. The giant beast that had soared into the sky fell into the dust once again, its chest and abdomen split open. Under the heavenly imperial sword, which had been accumulating power for a long time, the iron scales and the bones condensed from endless death instantly collapsed like gravel. The blade of Longinus at the end was completely broken. Black blood spurted out like a waterfall. The heavenly imperial sword gradually dissipated into origin substance. The heavily injured giant beast was still wriggling, crawling on the ground, savagely gnawing at all the fragments. Under the cracks in its body, a strange light appeared in the shattered abyss projection. It hadn't died yet. Abandoning its broken body and ignoring the endless cannon fire, it once again slammed into the burning Nautilus. Behind the broken bone wings, black blood continuously spilled out and dissipated in the wind. Now, the entire sky had become their battlefield. Entanglement, collision, burning, explosion, claws and teeth collided with steel. Cannon fire scattered, plowing out cracks in the mortal world. Under the cold gaze of the stars, this belated trial finally came to an end of its own. When the behemoth fell from the sky again, only the sound of cracking was left in the silent wilderness. Under the burning of the cannon fire from the Nautilus, The giant beast finally ushered in its final collapse. Withering was like a chain reaction spreading in its body. When the bubble of the abyss shattered under the light of the kingdom of heaven, this path of original sin that sank into hell also ushered in its end. This is the end, Woodman. Huai stepped on the scorched earth and looked down indifferently at the dying giant dragon. The raised finger fell, like a judge striking an iron hammer. The last wailing harpoon fell from the sky, completely nailing the last remnant of the angel of death to the ground. Flames surged and swallowed everything, but the dying giant dragon was still struggling. Towards Huai. Using the last of its strength, it raised its head and opened its mouth to bite. A mournful bloody light flashed in the air. In Huai hand, the long knife formed by countless steel crow feathers shook off the last of the black blood. The giant dragon's head fell from its neck just like that, rolling on the barren ground. There was no more sound. But after the neck of the giant beast of original sin split open, in the spurting black blood, a blurry outline appeared again. It gave up the last of its strength and pounced straight at Huai. It did not care that the blade slashed horizontally and vertically, tearing apart the last remaining soul. Its 5 fingers were like knives. It pierced deeply into Huai heart. It pierced through the heart. It's not over yet. Huai Woodman's pale face emerged from the black blood, and he whispered in hatred, "I have a gift for you." At that moment, the last disaster appeared in his hand. Poison stream, inject. The crystal of disaster from Samel, the remaining essence of poison stream that Woodman had. In an instant, it crossed the double isolation of the physical body and the sacred mark, seeped into the soul and spread. Another consciousness rose from the soul and gathered into Woodman's appearance again. It reached out to Huai consciousness. It ignored the spontaneous defense of the soul, and the storm of source form formed in Yun Zhongjuan's body. It was like peeling an onion. It broke through all the defenses layer by layer with ease and went to the deepest part of the soul and consciousness. Then, endless memories came rushing to his face. The city shrouded in flames. The sky sprinkled with heavy rain. The young man wailing in the ruins. The grief-stricken woman hugging her husband's corpse. After losing everything, the withered bones burned to ashes in the cluster bombs, all the pain and suffering that Danbo had once experienced, and even more distant past. The back view of Lord Yun Zhongjuan as he fell in the abyss, the regretful face of the Creator when he died, and countless souls who had surrendered and solidified, sinking into eternal oblivion, the world that was still shining behind them. And more deaths. Those deaths that should not have happened, those despair that should not have happened, pain, countless pain. The blood that gathered into an ocean, the tears that turned into a rainstorm, the mountains formed by the sacrificed bones, and the storm that was stirred up by the echoing cries of grief. This was the world that had turned into hell. But at the end of the endless memories, in the innermost layer of this tragic world, Woodman seemed to see the blurry figure of a woman. She seemed to have sensed his gaze. She looked back, and there seemed to be a faint smile on her face. It was so mocking. But soon, everything in front of him dissipated. In the deepest part of his soul, only the glorious outline appeared again, illuminating his dull eyes. It was so familiar, so distinct. But it made him so terrified. "What is this?" Woodman murmured in a daze. He felt the wail of his soul shattering. "Of course, it's the Book of Destiny that you've been dreaming of." Huai lowered his head and whispered in the ears of the shocked solidifier, "Didn't I give it to you last time, Woodman? Why are you so disdainful of the authority that you've been dreaming of? You have to know that when it was closest to you, it was only a step away." Just like that, he enjoyed the way that face twitched. He observed the flow and changes of fear, confusion, panic, and anger. He listened to the mournful screams that burst out from the regret and madness in the deepest part of his soul. It was as pleasant as the sound of nature. When he struggled with all his might, he realized that he could no longer break free from Huaishi's hands. When he wanted to send the information that caused him to fall into the abyss of despair to the outside world, he realized that even the poison stream had been completely isolated by Huaishi's body. This was a trap. It had been one from the beginning. But when he realized it, it was already too late. The reckoning will eventually begin, Woodman. Huaishi reached out, grabbed his neck, and lifted him from the ground. He told him, "You will be the first. You don't have to be upset or regret this, because one day, the Golden Dawn will be destroyed like you, just like how you destroyed the Republic. And on your corpses, a new Republic will be born. This is the ending that you are destined to have in the Book of Destiny." Under the rope of sorrow, Woodman let out a hoarse roar and voice from his throat, but it could not be heard clearly. Just like that, under the witness of the stars, he was gradually hanged by the gallows. The scattered black blood was burned by the lightning and flames and quickly evaporated, unable to escape. "Now it's time to part." Huaishi nodded and politely said goodbye. "Thank you for the gift. I also have a gift for you." As he raised his hand and spread out his 5 fingers, the light of countless stars fell. They formed a colorful packaging box. After the bow tied by the colorful foil slowly loosened, it revealed the bright and beautiful flames inside. This was the last strand of Gaia's blood that was specially prepared for Woodman. "Make a wish, Mr. Woodman." Huaishi smiled and told him, "From now on, happy death anniversary." Just like that, he blew out the faint light of the candle. At that moment, the light in the box disappeared, leaving only a small silver mirror. Like a young girl's dressing mirror, it had an exquisite edge. The smooth surface of the mirror reflected Woodman's distorted face, his trembling eyes, and the figure that was gradually appearing in his eyes. A gentle lullaby sounded in his ears again. It crossed a long and distant path, coming from the deepest part of hell and pain. The blonde woman in the white dress looked back from her eternal sleep. Her green eyes stared at Woodman's appearance, but there was no hatred. They were still so clear. The authoritative relic from the celestial genealogy, the mirror of day and night created by the miracle of the road of transformation. However, unlike the ferocity and madness of the black deity, it was like a mother, always compassionate and gentle. This was the healing harbor of all souls in the world, and the resting place of all hesitation and despair. White Deity Pelagia. Chapter 1163. Was that a reflection in the mirror or an illusion from the deepest recesses of his memories? It was difficult to distinguish between reality and illusion. The moment the silver mirror appeared, everything seemed to float away like bubbles. Only the woman in the mirror raised her hand and extended it towards Woodman, who was still on the gallows. It crossed the boundary between reality and illusion and broke through the endless passage of time. It landed on his forehead. Such a gentle touch, but it brought about a terrifying impact that felt like a falling star. An invisible storm erupted from that slender, white index finger. Huaishi only felt his vision darken. The countless consciousnesses in his soul involuntarily jumped for a moment, as if they were about to split into thousands of Huaishis. He subconsciously took a step back. However, that illusion had already dissipated in an instant. Immediately afterwards, however, a shrill cry rang out. It was so loud and shrill. The dying original sin beast was howling and roaring. An invisible storm had been stirred up. To Huaishi, it was just an impact that caused him to take a step back. However, in Woodman's eyes, it had already become a terrifying flood that swallowed up the entire world. In front of that finger, a small ripple spread out, casually triggering an endless chain reaction. It absorbed the remnants of disaster and scattered origin substances in the air. The invisible storm began to take shape. Within the reality domain, the ascendants who had been contaminated and corroded by the solidification couldn't help but let out sorrowful cries. They felt the pain of an ice-cold scalpel stabbing into their skulls. Immediately afterwards, they couldn't help but be immersed in an invisible wave of warmth. Wisps of sin of darkness rose up from their corrupted souls and flew into the distance, ushering in purification and annihilation. However, to Woodman, this wave of warmth was like lava that completely swallowed him up. It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded right in front of him. The febrile wind spread out, and everything in its path was peeled off. The seven-headed dragon's corpse spasmed violently. Countless scales rapidly turned to dust and were blown backward. Immediately afterwards, its flesh, organs, and even its pale white bones were all reduced to dust. Within the pure white storm domain, no other color existed. No other sound could be heard. The entire world was silent. Nothing else could be seen. Everything had disappeared into the distant darkness. There was only pain, endless pain. Burning, freezing, tearing, crushing, swelling, piercing, slashing, devouring, dismembering. The endless pain swallowed Woodman like an ocean. But the pain only lasted for a moment. Then, he disappeared. It was like an angry slap in the face. It was just an accidental loss of self-control, but it didn't last long. When the waves of pain in the deepest part of his soul receded, only Woodman was left crawling forward on the pale beach. He spasmed and struggled, but he no longer had the strength to move. It was no longer a poisonous stream of nothingness, nor was it the ferocious form of a solidified being. Under the authority of the White God, the last remnants of its consciousness actually turned around for a brief moment, and it regained its former appearance. He was already on the verge of death. As for that pair of dark green eyes, they were still quietly looking down. There was neither sorrow nor joy. "Pelagiah, is that you?" He stared at the pair of eyes, and the expression in his eyes changed. It was as if he was looking at a dream from the past, and it was hard to tell whether it was fear or surprise. It was unbelievable. At the same time, he couldn't touch it. No matter how he reached out to touch it, he couldn't feel the temperature of the illusion again. This was the distance of indifference. "Long time no see, Woodman." Pelagiah raised her hand, pulled back the messy hair on her forehead and asked in confusion, "It seems that the great future in hell isn't as beautiful as you think, right?" "Ha, stupid words." Woodman panted with difficulty and shook his head. "Is there any beautiful place in this world?" "Of course there is," Pelagiah replied, "but it has been destroyed by you. Do you still remember? When everything collapsed, you witnessed it yourself. All the people who were killed, their faces and eyes are still in your memory. You have done all of this with your own hands, Woodman." Woodman was stunned on the spot. He was silent for a long time, and he couldn't help but sneer. It was so mocking. "Yes, it's me," he asked. "Are you here to judge me?" "Of course." Pelagiah nodded. "I have never forgotten your betrayal, Woodman, even after so many years. This is the evil karma you deserve. This cold look really doesn't suit you, Pelagiah." Woodman grinned and felt the ridicule and absurdity of fate. "I thought it would be that guy Vitali. Ha 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 ha. In the end, even the eternally compassionate and gentle White God has to do this kind of dirty work? I really want to see your cruel look, Pelagiah," he asked teasingly, "or even you don't have redemption to give me." In the long silence, no one responded. There was only a calm look. Pelagiah stared at the pair of unfamiliar eyes. There was no hatred or disgust. She reached out and stroked the face of the betrayer. It was so gentle. "Shouldn't you have understood long before this?" White God bent down and whispered in the sinner's ear, "You have embarked on the path of rebellion. What awaits you ahead is only the endless abyss and hell. Even if the realm is right behind you, you can never turn back. I won't be furious, but I don't have any more mercy to give you. Woodman, you have to remember that I am Pelagiah, Bellowberg of the Kingdom of Heaven. I have only left you with a curse. In the destruction that you deserve." Such a calm narration, without any hatred or hatred, but with an obsession that was far more resolute than those things. She cruelly and straightforwardly made a conclusion. Even if one day, everything ushers in destruction and end, all things burn in flames, all lives wither in darkness, all sins usher in reckoning and judgment. What awaits you is only eternal pain and nothingness in the hell that you have created with your own hands, she said. Only you can't get any redemption or relief. The moment the judgment came, the last peaceful place in the depths of the soul collapsed. The barrier of the bubble broke, revealing the endless storm of origin substance in the distance. The poison of annihilation, the original sins he had accumulated, and even more, the hatred and pain from more dead people. In the long and endless time, for 70 years, the endless despair and thoughts that had sunk into the abyss. At this moment, all of them were pulled out from the records of the Book of Destiny. The killing intent and emotions of nothingness were given substance, forming a storm that could shake all consciousness, a dark ocean that could destroy all souls. Now, under White God's will, the chaotic color that could melt hell raised a monstrous wave and swept toward the last embankment. It nibbled at his soul and stripped away his consciousness bit by bit. It was as if thousands of pairs of painful hands were slowly and cruelly tearing him apart, pulling him into the despair that he had created with his own hands. Even if it would only exist in this short moment. But for those who fell into it, it would be endless suffering and torture that would last for eternity. This is the ending worthy of you, Woodman. Pelagiah said her goodbyes calmly. Just like that, she watched as the tide slowly rose and engulfed Woodman on the beach bit by bit, dragging him into the eternal void where only torment existed. She ignored the cries and pleas from the sea, shouting and urging her to stay. She coldly turned around and left. She never looked back. Everything came to an end in an instant. Eternal judgment, eternal torture, and eternal ravaging. At the end of the endless suffering, the broken soul was completely annihilated. Even in the deepest part of the land of dreams, inside the sealed stone coffin, the shriveled corpse was spasming in pain. Dark blood flowed out of the body, quickly evaporating and disappearing. In the spreading destruction, the corpse trembled, and its eyes suddenly opened. A silent roar. An invisible storm followed the connection between the origin substance and came in reverse. Then, it exploded with a sorrowful cry. It swept toward the world of the traitors in front of it, swallowing everything it saw along the way. The alarm sounded. In the core, the slumbering Westcott woke up from his endless dream. But when he wanted to cut off the stairway to heaven that led to the gamble, it was already too late. Countless evil thoughts and good thoughts entangled together, forming an explosion that could tear all souls apart, causing all the solidifiers to fear. A shocking pale white color gushed out from the coffin, rumbling and spreading, sweeping across the entire underground sealed area in an instant. Only the wails of countless solidifiers could be heard as their souls exploded. The anger from the White God descended here, guiding the anger and despair that had been sleeping for 70 years to set off an invisible wave, covering everything within its reach. The sound of cracking could be heard incessantly. After a long, long time, when the terrifying storm completely subsided, Westcott's projection descended, and no remnants of the poison stream could be found. In the broken stone coffin, the corpse shattered silently, turning into dust. The soul within had already disappeared. Only a crack remained here, extending downwards into the depths of the land of dreams. It pierced straight through the layers of seals and restrictions, piercing through the seal. All the soul fragments that had been sealed and frozen in the shackles had already disappeared without a trace. They went away with the storm, disappeared without a trace. In the darkness, in those nightmares filled with despair and pain, Vitali suddenly opened his eyes. In the quiet town in the illusion, he looked around in a daze and heard the sound of something shattering. Cracks appeared all around the town. In the sky, countless white cracks intersected. The turbulence suddenly enveloped the entire mirror of day and night. But when Vitali tried to stabilize it, he discovered that everything was out of his control. those illusions, those shattered souls preserved in bubbles, and the world in front of him no longer responded to his calls. He ran through the streets in a sorry state, shouting at the silent houses on both sides. But no one responded. The sky, the earth, the lights, everything was quickly moving away from him. But when everything disappeared without a trace, in the world of nothingness, he once again saw the illusion that had appeared in his dreams countless times. Smiling, at the end of the crack, she waved at him. Her green eyes were filled with gentleness. Vitaly was stunned on the spot, stiff, like a fool. Pella? Gaia? He took a step forward, not daring to touch the illusion. Pella, is that you? What responded to him was a light hug. With a gentle temperature. It was so familiar. She used so much force, as if she was afraid that she would leave him again. She called his name, and warm tears fell on his neck. I'm back, Waja. White God, who had returned, smiled and shed tears. Are you okay? Vitaly hesitated, timidly and uneasily reaching out his hand to respond to her hug. But when he felt this familiar scene again, he couldn't feel his emotions surging. Ecstasy. He couldn't suppress his shout, responded to her hug, and immersed himself in this short illusion. Follow me. Pella, I have something to show you. Holding her hand, Vitaly turned around and looked for the town in the distance. He wanted to show her everything he had done all these years and introduce her to those children back then. But when he turned around, he found that the town he was familiar with had already appeared behind Pella. Those familiar children, and even more, those who had been lost in hell, and those who had returned, were all looking at him with gentle smiles. They waved goodbye. At that moment, Vitaly was stunned. He seemed to have understood something. Wait! He raised his hand and wanted to stop her, but he saw Pella's smile in front of him. She suddenly reached out and pushed him away. She was so determined that she didn't allow him to refute or question her. Goodbye, Waja. She said goodbye softly. It's been hard on you for so many years. Behind Vitaly, a door that led to the light opened again. It swallowed that sorry figure. It disappeared. Ivory Tower, Great Library. The busy work continued. The scholars rushed around and checked the data sent from all sides, but the noise didn't disturb the old man sleeping soundly on the counter. The dark and thin old man was drooling and snoring. He put his bare feet on the counter and scratched himself from time to time when he turned over. However, the people around him didn't dare to disturb him when they passed by. Instead, they carefully lowered their voices. Only a panicked shout was not concealed at all. Anya rushed in and agilely passed by the people blocking her way. She landed on the table and almost lost her balance. However, she didn't care about her messy hair and grabbed the old man's arm and shook it crazily. Not good. Not good. Something happened. When Krishna wiped his saliva and opened his eyes, she had already carried him and ran again. His thin body swayed in the wind and his head hit the door frame in the air. But then, without waiting for him to speak, she hit him again. Be gentle. Be gentle. Krishna pressed his hand on his hair and complained helplessly. What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry? What did your teacher do this time? Oh my God! He won't even let a retired old man go. Although he's my teacher, this is different from that. It's that. Anyway, you'll know when you see it. Ania replied incoherently, kicking down who knows how many doors along the way. She rushed into the silent hall. There, many people had already rushed over. Whether it was Yangtze, Raymond, Anton, or the other teachers, they all stood in the distance and looked at everything in the hall in a daze. In the center of the hall, there was a majestic and gorgeous giant mirror that was dozens of meters tall. It was emitting a faint light and didn't have the silence of the past. However, what was more eye-catching was the thin figure in front of the mirror. His hair was white and his black clothes were as black as ink. The long robe was decorated with golden threads. Majestic and cold. So familiar. Thali? You can come out? In the sudden shock, Krishna's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. However, when he came back to his senses, he couldn't help but dance in ecstasy. He shouted, laughed, and danced. Krishna rushed forward, hugged him, and patted his back with all his might. "Welcome back, old friend." The middle-aged man with white hair nodded. "I'm back." When he looked at the giant mirror in front of him, his once cold face was already covered in tears. "Did you see it, Pelagia?" He called out to the distant figures. "I'm back." Chapter 1164. In the decision-making room, when the Angel of Death was completely annihilated by Huaishur, many people shouted excitedly. The disaster was completely eradicated, and the excellent performance of Heavenly Kingdom's lineage made many people's eyes pop out of their sockets. At the back, the lineage masters who were drinking tea together couldn't help but clap and congratulate. "Congratulations, congratulations!" Xian Niao was the first to look at Russell. "It's just unfinished business from back then." Russell shook his head. "There's nothing to celebrate." Xian Niao smiled. "Isn't it a good thing to have a successor?" If Huaishur used the fragment of the day and night mirror to kill flowing venom, there was more or less an element of luck involved. Now, as a level 4, he killed the complete state of the beast of original sins cleanly, crushing its bones and scattering its ashes several times. This was a shocking achievement without any exaggeration. Indeed, we should have a toast. Feathered Serpent smacked his bland tea, slightly regretful. If not for the fact that the occasion was serious, he would have brought a bottle of whiskey or 2 cups. In the end, other than the dog urine coffee provided by the Astronomy Association for free, the only thing he could drink was the old stingy Xian Niao's pot of coffee that had been soaked for more than 10 times. "Was the tea can beside you really just to make up the numbers? Can't you put more in?" He had already stared at Xian Niao 2 or 3 times, but Xian Niao just pretended not to understand. He couldn't do anything about it. Forget it, let this old thing do as he pleases. However, speaking of which, there's another question. Xian Niao asked curiously. "Woodman's complete state is so tough. How did you kill him back then?" As soon as he said that, countless curious gazes looked over, filled with doubts and a desire for gossip. "That's right. How did you do it back then?" After all, Mimir was not like Heimdall, who was not good at fighting head-on. Even if everyone knew that Russell was very fierce back then, before the fall of the heavenly state, he was still a level 4. He was not as fierce as Huaishur, relying on the secret apparatus to kill Samuel, right? Russell was slightly stunned, as if he didn't understand. "Actually, it's not that difficult." When talking about the past, Old Tortoise revealed a nostalgic expression, and the gentle smile at the corner of his mouth became creepy. "Everyone just needs to chat, drink some wine, and take a stroll. Before he can react, we just need to push him into the particle collider, and that's it. Although the early preparations are a little troublesome, after closing the door, all I need to do is press 2 buttons and the problem will be solved. It's quite simple." Speaking of this, he paused for a moment and sighed softly. Oh, speaking of which, until the last moment, he still thought that he was the only one with a knife in his arms, ready to make a move. It's a pity that I didn't manage to take a picture of that expression and preserve it forever. There was complete silence. Mystic Bird and Feathered Serpent were silent for a long time. She didn't know what to say. She just wanted to find time to take 2 more breaths of the iced oxygen from her home. How was this King easy and simple? Back then, everyone else was caught off guard, and you were the only one who made the first move. You look like you don't need to worry about being stabbed in the back as long as you stab others in the back first. It's really a little chilling to look at. Thinking about how Woodman, a dignified 5th order and creator, could only sullenly be reduced to ashes in the storm of countless calamities and miracles in the end, everyone felt sincere respect and admiration for Renee. After offending the abbot, all he got was a stab in the throat. He could still continue to be alive and kicking. He was really lucky and lucky. And, most importantly, they must choose their own place to drink tea with this old tortoise in the future. Otherwise, who knew if they would sit on the crater of a volcano, sigh, let's not talk about it, let's not talk about it. It's all in the past. Russell waved his hand, picked up his teacup, and smiled. Everyone, drink tea, drink tea. And so, during the short break in the war, the conversation continued. But not long after, Russell's cell phone on the table vibrated slightly. In the smoke-filled smoke, Russell looked down and turned the phone over again, calmly continuing the topic just now. White God. The feathered serpent smiled knowingly. Congratulations. Russell was silent for a moment and shook his head. No, he said, it's Black God. The feathered serpent was stunned for a moment, but soon understood something. He and the mystic bird looked at each other with a complicated expression. Sacrifice is precious. He sighed softly and didn't say anything else. The return of a fifth order was a big deal for all pedigrees, and there was nothing worth hiding. Celestial genealogy didn't need to keep a low profile anymore. She could stand on the stage and do whatever she wanted. Moreover, the scene in the mirror just now had been transmitted to everyone. Combined with the observation report from the abyss not long ago, everyone more or less had an idea in their hearts. It was difficult to hide their admiration. To be able to awaken the white deity using the recording method was a pleasant surprise that no one had expected. Was this the Book of Destiny? 70 years ago, when the Kingdom of Heaven fell, the first to be included in the list of targets was the Utopia's Path of Change. Black God, who didn't have any vigilance against his companions, was the first to have his soul pierced by Westcott's Pied Piper's dagger, forming a spreading contamination. The unstoppable solidification spread from the top of the Path of Change to the bottom. In order to protect all the members of the Path of Change who were corroded by solidification, the surviving White God burned all of his soul and miracles to pull Black God back from the edge of danger. But he didn't do everything. The remnant of the Philosopher's Stone mutated into the authoritative relic, Mirror of Day and Night. From then on, Pelagia's soul had become the vessel of authority, protecting countless soul fragments in the mirror and prolonging the time of her dying breath. In the long 70 years, those who ascended the Path of Change withered day by day. After losing the correction from the Source Codex and the Book of Destiny, the irredeemable impulse to self-destruct and the madness of the origin substance splitting had distorted the Path of Change. No matter how much they struggled in vain, no matter what method they used, they couldn't escape from the shadow of solidification. In the end, they could only helplessly walk into the mirror. Even Anna, who had the protection of the old godmother, couldn't escape from this terrifying shadow. 2/3 of Catherine's resentment towards Russell was because he didn't do anything. A clerk who couldn't obtain the Book of Destiny couldn't fulfill his duties. And when Huai Shi returned to the celestial genealogy with the real Book of Destiny, everything changed immediately. Even if he couldn't use the correction value of the Book of Destiny, as long as it existed, all the paths that had lost their reference could find their original axes again, and they would no longer be at a loss. And most importantly, through his personal experience, the records of the Mirror of Day and Night were once again imprinted in the Book of Destiny. The reappearance of Gaia's blood was a second chance for White God. This was the hope of redeeming everything. The path of transformation itself was the path closest to the essence of the soul. After reaching the domain of Black God and White God, they no longer had any physical bodies and could be transformed into pure soul existences. Even if they left the gamble, with the Mirror of Day and Night as a carrier, there was still a possibility of resurrection through the spirit coffin. Everyone thought that it would be White God who would return. But this time, Pelagia still didn't choose to be alone. Once again, she chose to sacrifice. With the thoughts, kindness, malice, and even Woodman's accumulated sins as firewood, she once again turned herself into a flame and ignited the storm of purification. She followed the existence of the heaven ladder and broke into the land of dreams. After retrieving many sealed and frozen soul fragments, she returned to the mirror of day and night. Just like that, with white God's dedication and sacrifice as the price, she replaced black God and became the pillar of the mirror of day and night, mending many broken souls. After completely losing the hope of resurrection, she brought Vitali back from the brink of death. This was the miracle exchanged for by the second sacrifice. The path of transformation welcomed rebirth, and all the souls in the mirror had the hope of mending. But from then on, white God no longer existed in the world. Only black God alone returned from the abyss. Should this be a celebration or a mourning? Except for celestial genealogy, no one else could understand the bitterness and pain in it. Mystic Bird patted Russell's shoulder and sighed. Everything is meaningful, isn't it? Russell sighed softly. This is Ms. Pelagia's choice. There's nothing to sympathize with. In the darkness, there will always be someone who ignites themselves to illuminate the future for others. This is the value of sacrifice. For inheritors like us, the only thing we can do is not let their sacrifice be in vain. Don't worry about me. There are more things worth paying attention to. He held the teacup in his hand, raised his eyes, and looked at the world covered by flames and turbulence in the mirror. It's not over yet, my friends. It's not time to relax yet, even if the situation was good. But it might not be the dawn before victory. Some intuition that belonged to Loki told him that the darkest time had yet to come. Based on his understanding of the Golden Dawn, that group of bastards were definitely not people who would sit still and wait for death. On the contrary, that group of bastards must still be brewing something in this short silence, he thought, and suddenly asked casually, speaking of which, with the efficiency of the Continuation Academy, our natural enemy should be in place, right? Mystic Bird and Feathered Serpent's expressions froze. And on the image from the mirror the vast darkness spread out like a tide. In the deepest part of the darkness, a roar like footsteps burst out. Something was coming. Before that, the moment Woodman was reduced to ashes in the storm, Huai-Shur watched the silver mirror leave his hand and disappear into the void before his eyes. Pelagia's last words and advice came to his ears. It was some kind of danger warning extracted from Woodman's soul. The secret entangled in layers of arcana and curses completely self-destructed the moment it was extracted. The contents and everything related to it were ominous. However, before that, he could still distinguish the chilling aura within. There was only one vague word. Hell on earth. And the moment Huai-Shur looked back, he saw a figure not far away. It was looking at him. At that moment, a chill ran down his spine. But it was not the omen of death, but some kind of intrinsic disgust and resistance that absolutely could not coexist. Right in front of him, countless fragments flew through the wind and stayed in the air. The moment a certain will descended, the ashes that were burned to ashes gathered again. Restriction lifted, personality simulation installation, composition transformation reprojection, projection complete. As if turning the world into a curtain, a beam of faint light descended from the void, holding back all the fragments that could be used and gradually pieced them together. After that, a lifelike silhouette appeared. There were no distinctive features. It was hard to tell if the silhouette was male or female, and its age was unknown. Only the pupils had a faint glow that made people uneasy. When Huai-Shur flicked his finger without hesitation, tens of thousands of lightning bolts descended from the sky. However, after the vast destruction swept through, the distant projection still existed amidst the endless dust. There was no entity. It was just nothingness itself. Hello, Huai-Shur. The thing that descended from the void curled the corner of its mouth, revealing an emotionless smile, and told him, "Nice to meet you. I am Alistair," he said. "You can call me the Fool." Chapter 1165. The world was silent, and only the whistling of the wind in the distance could be heard. The destruction and loud noises were isolated by the projection, as if a small greenhouse had been created in a world full of turbulence, fire, thunder, and storms. Just as the projection announced his identity. But in such a solemn atmosphere, Huai Shi's shoulders couldn't help but tremble. He turned his head away. Awkwardness was as sudden as farts. At this moment, even Alistair or the fool frowned slightly and fell into confusion. They couldn't understand Huai Shi's reaction. "I'm sorry, I just found out that I'm connected to the story of the reality in a strange place, so I couldn't help it." Huai Shi waved his hand. "It's a pity that Woodman died early. Otherwise, the gray fog of original sin would suit you. Well, it's okay, you can continue. Can we fast forward to the part where you give me a code name and we all have a meeting? If you have such an idea, we naturally won't refuse." The fool ignored the mockery in Huai Shi's words and said patiently, "In the current Alistair's gold sequence, death, the hanged man, and judgment are all very suitable for you. If you are willing to come, we are willing to give up our positions. If it's you, you can even fill the important vacancy of the Wheel of Fortune, right? It sounds like you all have small departments in Golden Dawn?" Huai Shi heard this and couldn't help but shake his head. What is this? An inner circle within the inner circle? With this level of Russian dolls, will there be an extra hairtail at the end of the year? Since you are so generous, why don't you give up the seat under your butt and let me sit on it? Until now, he finally faintly noticed the strange nature of Alistair himself. Ignoring the internal structure built according to the sequence of the tarot cards, it could be understood just by looking at the tower that controlled the ladder and the world that interfered with the secret instrument. It was definitely the result of carefully selected and cultivated from countless hellish tools. And the existence of Alistair and the others was a toolbox prepared for Golden Dawn to destroy the reality. And even if Golden Dawn was ignored, among all the information about the tarot cards, the most special and important thing was probably the existence of the Fool. The serial number is 0. The beginning in the tarot cards, the revelation and foundation of all phenomena and changes. Whether it was the other cards or all the changes, they were all based on the existence of the Fool himself. Until now, the Fool's card had not appeared on the chessboard. It wasn't that the other party didn't enter the arena. Instead, even the rules of the gambling house were unable to interpret and record the existence of the other party. It was like an independent record that could not be compiled again. It would not accept any changes, yet it had silently seeped into the rules. He came to Huai Shi. What was he trying to do? What the hell was he? Huai Shi was on guard, feeling uneasy. My position? The Fool sighed and said, "You can choose any of the other titles other than lover, but the Fool is not one of them." This was not because of stinginess or fear, but purely because of the difference in nature. I am an entity formed from the characteristics of all the members of the sequence, and I constitute the deepest essence of Alistair's collective. How can I be comprehensive if I only talk about the individual? Huai Shi was silent. Only his expression gradually turned cold. The other party did not hide his existence at all and openly revealed all his secrets in front of Huai Shi. The so-called the Fool was made up of all Alistair's sequences, including all the Golden Dawn's inner and outer formations, as well as the subconscious and incident records of countless members of the derivative organizations. It could be said that he was the foundation formed by the fusion of countless Alistair's consciousness. If Alistair was the hand and foot that the Golden Dawn carefully created, he was the soul that the Golden Dawn created for him. Now, the Golden Dawn was right in front of him. First meeting in this short period of silence, Huai Shi stared coldly at the existence in front of him. An earth-shattering explosion and fire rose in the distance. The ground shook like a carpet, causing new wrinkles and cracks. But here, everything was calm and peaceful. It was like a small haven, independent of the storm and the tide. The flickering light illuminated the eyes of both of them. It was as if death was the candle that lit the meeting between the two of them. Should I feel flattered that the fool has graced me with his presence? Huaisher looked at his neck carefully and seriously. Or do you want me to bow to your throne? What you want to give me is not a bow, Huaisher, but a sword. Just like how you won't be happy with my arrival, you just want to kill me. Let me guess, decapitation? The fool paced around casually. His bare feet stepped on the charred ground, but there was not a speck of dust on it. This was because the distance between him and this world was not just a small gap, but a long distance from here to the bottom of the abyss. I don't like lies. Lies don't have a summary. Compared to that, I prefer to be open and honest, he said. Only sincerity can be the prerequisite for communication. Communication leads to understanding. Only understanding leads to recognition. Only recognition can allow us to gather together from the bottom of our hearts and work together. I want to talk to you. The fool, no, Golden Dawn said so. And then? Betrayal, fall, tears of blood and death. Huaisher sneered. Doesn't this process sound familiar to you? It's like, when did it happen? What has happened is bound to happen again. The fool shook his head and looked at the world in the distance. Those are things that have happened countless times. If one day it happens to Golden Dawn, I won't be an exception. There were many things that were destined from the very beginning. Just like what you see in front of me. As he spoke, he waved his hand and dispersed the formless bubbles. The deafening roar once again exploded in their ears. Amidst the mourning of the earth and the howling of the hurricane, the solemn silhouette of the skeleton monarch and the giant of the world could be seen in the rolling thunder clouds in the distance. That was the crowned one of America, the world's giant Tlaaltecutli. The embodiment of the boundless earth manifested its own great power at this moment, suppressing the flowing river of blood with its own power and colliding with the ruler. The earth collapsed under the trampling. Soon, thick and dirty liquid seeped out from the cracks. The eye of obscurity had been implanted into the 9 springs in the deepest part of the earth. The corruption and distortion of the pollution source continued to spread, climbing up the ankles of the giant of the world. It continued to corrode and penetrate, peeling off a huge amount of earth and stone, miraculously dying. But new destruction descended from the dome. Endless natural disasters were created under the mobilization of the storm totem, shrouding the entire region. The silhouette of Osiris rose from the storm. Everywhere it passed, everything was dyed red with blood. The corona held up by Fusang was constantly shaking, gradually dimming and shrinking inwards. The majestic halo of the solar almanac clashed in the darkness, crushing the path of bones of the fallen nation. But more distortion continued to spread under the power of the withered king's decree. Between the dim stars, fissures were slowly extending inwards. The war was still going on. It would not stop because of Huaisher's victory, nor would it slow down because of the arrival of dawn. Instead, it welcomed the full counterattack of the abyss. How spectacular! The fool sighed. The sky is broken, the earth is collapsing, the ashes of bones and the smell of blood are floating in the wind. Do you see, the world has become like hell? Everything will be destroyed one day, no matter how noble the ideal or how big the world is. Isn't this what you created? Huaisher sneered. You started the war with your own hands and destroyed everything with your own hands. Why are you crying in silence? No, you shouldn't say that, right? The fool turned back and looked at him, helplessly spreading his hands. Perhaps we have a part to play in this, but the Golden Dawn is far from qualified to be the root of all evil. Besides, isn't war created by both sides? He said, 2 equal sides, fighting and killing each other, using all means to destroy the enemy and protect themselves. Only then is it called war. Otherwise, it is only slaughter and destruction. Huaisher couldn't help but want to laugh at the profound words and the countless riddles hidden within. No, it should be said that he almost vomited his dinner from last night. Playing this game in front of me? I have stopped being cold 800 years ago. Next time, please change to a beautiful big sister's skin, okay? At least I will give you some face and waver a little. Could it be that I have misunderstood? Huai Shi asked. The Golden Dawn went through so much trouble, stirring up trouble in hell, and in the end, created a poet to describe all of this to me in beautiful words, so that in the future, it will be recorded in the annals of history. Well, that's good, but that's not important. The fool shook his head casually, not caring about Huai Shi's mockery. But have you really not wondered? Why poetry? Why is it that both sides are equal? Above the countless dust clouds, the fool suddenly turned back and asked, why can the realm of reality fight against so many hells in just a few thousand years of history? How is it that after so many wars of the worlds, the solitary realm can survive until now? He asked, relying on the so-called sacrifice? But is sacrifice omnipotent? When a chip is burned, only the ashes of another chip will be left. But why can you fight against the abyss? Huai Shi coldly looked at him. He was unmoved. That's right, why? He nodded without any fluctuation in his emotions. That makes sense. Why have I never thought of such a question before? Can you please tell me? It can't be that you were born in the realm of reality and entered the abyss just to be a double agent and a traitor, right? Who would have thought that for such a long time, it was actually you who had been silently dragging hell back and protecting us? It was really lamentable. As expected of the Golden Dawn, it was admirable. Do you want me to give you a medal on behalf of the realm of performance and make 2 banners? He paused for a moment, the fake smile on his face disappeared, and he was expressionless again. Or should we quickly skip the boring part of the argument and start the fight to the death? The sound of the 7 tides echoed. The blade pierced the ground between the two of them, cut through those hypocritical attitudes and words that were not worth mentioning. Cold killing intent rose from the blade, but the fool was still unmoved. Instead, he showed a look of realization and surprise. Is this the art of forging? It's a perfect match for the nature of your soul. The fool sincerely praised. It seems that you have indeed obtained the complete inheritance of the Sunmaker. In time, the results of the Sunmaker will definitely be revived in your hand. Just like that, he stretched out his hand to touch the blade of the sword, ignoring the sharp tide formed from the boundless water vapor on the blade. His palm was instantly crushed into pieces. It was cut off at the wrist, but he didn't regret it. Apart from that, you must have obtained more, right? The representative skills of the 13 kings of forging, the blueprint and framework of the Gear Emperor, and even the machine of immortality? He looked at Huai Shi's right hand where the forging furnace used to be, but there was no greed in his expression, only calmness. Why didn't the Astronomy Society obtain the greatest treasure, Huai Shi? Such an amazing creation, why is it just shelved? Dozens of eras ago, when Qing Jing died, the Village of Dusk exhausted all its potential. All the kings of forging used all their methods, and finally, with the help of the workshop masters, they were able to complete the machine of immortality, but now, their achievements have been easily surpassed by you all and left behind. In an ancient era, an entire world had nurtured the largest and most advanced civilization over hundreds of thousands of years. The treasures they obtained after sacrificing everything, to the Astronomy Society, were only techniques that could be used as a reference. Moreover, this was only one example. There were countless similar examples. The vast habitat's art of reproduction, Luo Jing's white map, Hui Hai's art of planting, and the great idea of Nirvana City, those things, to the Astronomy Society, were just collections to show off their heritage. Countless dead people spent their life's efforts, but the final crystallization was abandoned by you like a pair of worn-out shoes. Why? There is only one reason, and that is because we are the Astronomy Society. Ha, how arrogant, how great, and how pitiful! The fool grinned and suddenly laughed. A look of mockery and disdain that only belonged to humans appeared on that lofty face. Why sure. Can you please tell me, why did the modern realm, in just tens of thousands of years, and the Astronomy Society, in less than a few hundred years, surpass the achievements at the end of all eras? Why was the modern realm able to fight against the ruler of hell, who had lasted from countless disasters to this day? Could it be that compared to the worlds of the past countless eras, you are the only special lucky ones? But when has this world ever been so generous? Miracles are conserved, why sure, everything has a price. Now, the fool hovered above the shattered land and asked the successor of the utopia again. Where did this prosperity that you are so proud of come from? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.